Spencer. Dool.
Here.
Foster.
Here.
McKay.
Here.
Green is absent, as is Fry. Bill Johnson.
Here.
Blick. Nix.
Here.
Fox.
Here.
Warren.
Here.
Joe Johnson.
Present.
Miles.
Present.
Zimbelman. Aldridge.
Here.
Williams Bay.
Here.
Sir, I show 13 members are present.
Thank you. Now we'll move to approval of prior MAPC meeting minutes. We have two healthy stacks in front of us here. The first one is the minutes from December 14. I show that Warren, Joe Johnson, and Blick were absent from that meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mr. Aldrich, second by Ms. Miles. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The next minutes were from December 28. On that one, I show that Nix, Warren, and Miles were absent.
Move for approval. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second motion from Mr. Joe Johnson, and second from who? Oh, Mr. Williams Bay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The next minutes are going to be deferred. The minutes from January 11 will be deferred to our next meeting. We do have a BZA case, which we will take up after we go through the consent agenda. So let's go through and see what we can pass on consent. The first case is sub 2023-00042. It's Pegasus edition on Pawnee and South Webb Road. Does anyone on the commission want to hear that case?
Yes.
We'll hear that case. Next, we have sub 2023-00061, which is located at 85th Street North and 55th Street West in the county. Does anyone on the commission want to hear that case? Is there anyone from the public here that would like to hear that case? If not, we'll take 2.2 on consent. The next case is sub 2023, and that case has been deferred.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve item 2.2.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Bill Johnson and a second by Ms. Cox. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We don't have any vacation items, so we will move to public hearings. First one, 4.1, is a con 2023-00046 that is located at 127th Street East and near East 39th Street South. Does anyone on the commission want to hear that case?
I think we have to hear it because it came back from the county commission, didn't it?
Oh, yeah, that's right. We're going to hear that case. Okay, the next one, 4.2, is CUP 2023-00049. That is located near US 54, 400 and a quarter mile east of 135. Is there anybody on the council, on the city
Commission.
on the city commission, the MAPC, that wants to hear that case?
Don't we need to, since it's recommended that we approve part of it and deny the other part? Or not? Can we?
Can staff help me with that?
We've always heard a case if it was recommended for denial, so I think in this case, we probably have to hear it.
Okay, we'll hear that case. Next, item 4.3 is a PUD 2023. It's a zone change in the county located on near the 263rd Street West and 39th Street South. Is there anyone on the commission that wants to hear that case? Is there anyone present from the public that wants to hear that case?
Yes.
We'll hear that case. Next, 4.4 is zoning 2023-00069. That is located generally west of 37th Street North and north 247th Street West. Does anyone on the commission want to hear that case? Is there anyone from the public that would like to hear that case? We'll hear that case. And the last one is 4.5, the zoning case 2023-00075, located south of Ridge Road and north of West Maple Street. Anyone on the planning commission want to hear that case? Is there anyone from the public that wants to hear that case? If not, we'll take that on consent.
Move we approve 4.3.
Second.
Excuse me, 4.3 or 4.5?
4.5, I'm sorry.
I'll second that.
4.5, we have a motion by Mr. McKay, second by Mr. Bill Johnson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Excuse me, at this point, we will go back to the BZA case that we have. We will temporarily dismiss the planning commission meeting and open the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. First, I call for approval of the minutes of the meeting, and I show that McKay, Green, Nix were absent for that.
Move to approve. Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Miles and a second by you. Okay, by Foster. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. So now we'll call on staff to present the BZA 2023-00065.
Good afternoon, everyone. Christina Reith with planning staff. This is case number BZA 2023-00065. The applicant requests a variance to waive the landscape buffer requirements on the north and south sides of a property zoned TF3 two-family residential district. The site is located on the east side of South 167th Street West, within 1/4 mile north of West US 54/400. The site is currently undeveloped, but the applicant has indicated that a gas regulator facility will be constructed on site shortly. So earlier this year, a conditional use to allow utility major on the site was recently approved. This is Con 2023-00037. Just a bit of background, the Wichita Landscape Ordinance requires a landscape street yard and a landscape buffer for non-residential developments when they are adjacent to residential zoning districts. So this is zone TF3 and utilities are not exempt from the Wichita Landscape Ordinance. The applicant intends to install landscape buffering along the west property line with 7 trees along the west side of the proposed fence, which satisfies the landscape street yard requirement. Because of the SF5 zoning to the north, if you look at my map here, is in white, and the TF3 zoning to the south, which is in yellow, landscape buffering is required on the north and south property lines. Deviations from the landscape ordinance require a variance. So a bit of case history on this property. In 2020, the property was rezoned from limited commercial and single family to 2-family residential district. In 2021, the property was platted. And then, as I said earlier, in 2023, a conditional use was approved to allow utility major on site. And then also, the Wichita City Council approved a request to vacate a portion of platted complete access control in order to permit a utility access drive from South 167th Street for a gas regulator. So let's go through the 5 criteria for granting a variance. 1, the criteria is that the request is unique to this property and was not created by the applicant. So the applicant states that, quote, the subject property is unique from most in the same zoning district because of the allowed use that permits utility major on property zoned TF3. The subject property will house a gas regulator that fallen tree limbs and the accumulation of foliage can damage the regulator. Staff is not in agreement with the above statement. Utility major is permitted by conditional use in residential zoning and is not exempt from the requirements set forth by the landscape ordinance. The applicant has the option to plant smaller ornamental trees instead of shade trees, and they have the ability to specify the species of trees whose foliage is less likely to fall and damage the regulator. Second criteria is that the granting of the variance will not adversely affect the rights of the adjacent property owners or residents. So the applicant states that the intended use of the subject property is to develop a gas regulator, and the removal of landscape requirements is necessary for the maintenance and general clearance of foliage and fallen leaves in the equipment. Therefore, granting this adjustment will not create an adverse impact on existing uses in the surrounding area. The north portion of the subject site is adjacent to an open space, approximately 400 feet to a parking lot and the Goddard School. The south portion of the property is adjacent to a 100-foot pipeline easement. Staff is not in agreement with the above statement. The purpose of the Wichita Landscape Ordinance is to screen undesirable views and break up large areas of screening to increase the attractiveness of development. The surrounding open space without landscaping in place will actually increase the visibility of the screening fence and equipment associated with the gas regulator. The third criteria, the strict application of the provisions of the code would constitute an unnecessary hardship on the applicant. The applicant states that, quote, the gas regulator will have a 6-foot slatted fence for screening and protection. Requiring the landscaping within the landscape ordinance regulations would allow for the possibility of a dangerous environment for the regulator. Leaves, fallen branches, and other landscaping foliage present a danger of fire and other calamities within the regulator. Staff is not in agreement with the above statement. The applicant has the option to plant smaller ornamental trees instead of shade trees, and they have the ability to specify the kinds of trees whose foliage are less likely to fall and damage the regulator. 4, the variance will not adversely affect the public health, safety, morals, order, convenience, prosperity, general welfare, or harmonious development of the community. The applicant states that, quote, approving the variance will have no adverse effect on public health, safety, morals, order, convenience, prosperity, or general welfare. Gas regulators are installed along the existing pipeline for safety and regulatory reasons. Staff is not in agreement with the above statement. Utilities are not exempt from the Wichita Landscape Ordinance. Other approved utility major uses have had to comply. Removing the landscape requirement does not promote harmonious development of the community. And then the last criteria is the granting of the variance will not be opposed to the general spirit and intent of the code. The applicant states that, quote, "The spirit of the zoning code is to protect adjoining property owners from adverse impacts that would negatively affect their properties. Again, when considering all the factors of the request, including the amount of open space around this gas regulator, this variance will not detract from the adjacent uses and maintain the intent of the code." Staff is not in agreement with the above statement. The landscape ordinance seeks to screen undesirable views and break up large areas of screening to increase the attractiveness of development. Open space around the property without any landscaping does not break up the large area of screening required, which is opposed to the spirit and intent of the Wichita Landscape Ordinance. So the recommendation of the staff is that the request to waive the landscaping requirements on the north and south ends of the property does not meet the 5 criteria required to grant a variance. Should the board determine that all 5 conditions necessary to granting the variance be found to exist, staff recommends the following condition of approval is that the site shall be developed in general conformance to the approved site plan. So let's go through some of the site photos here. This is an aerial of the subject site. Next slide, please. This is the Wichita Future Growth Concept Map. Next slide, please. This is the site plan that was submitted by the applicant that demonstrates where the gas regulator is going to be and where the pipeline easement is. Next slide, please. This is a picture of the proposed slatted fence that they want to install around the property. Next slide, please. This is looking east towards the site. Next slide, please. This is looking north away from the site. You can see some of the open space here and the school as well. Next slide, please. This is looking south away from the site. And then you can see where the easement is, where this dirt patch is. And I believe that concludes my site photos. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Yes, Mr. Bill Johnson.
I don't know if you can answer this, but how many regulators are in the city of Wichita?
I don't have that answer for you at this time.
Would they all be screened exactly like you're requesting this one?
I believe they are required to screen because they are a non-residential use in residential zoning.
And it depends on when they were constructed. If they were constructed before the landscape ordinance, they would not be required to have landscaping. If they were
Just
constructed
being
after.
being in the construction business and dealing with a pipeline, very, very, very restricted to what we can do there. I don't like to see trees where there's gas lines, roots and whatever could create problems.
Mr. Nix.
At the beginning of your comments, did you say 7 trees? Is that what I heard you say?
Yes.
So 7 trees, small trees, takes care of what you're at?
For the landscape street yard. Yes, on the west side of the property, on the east side of the street.
They're proposing to provide 7 trees on the west side of the property. The tree requirement on the north and the south is a calculation of 1 shade tree per 40 linear feet along each property line. If they were going to use ornamental trees, you replace 1 shade tree with 2 ornamental trees.
So
the conversation is not about, they're going to provide 7 on the west side. There was not a discussion of how many trees they were needing to provide along the property lines that they're asking the waiver for.
What about Bill's comment on the pipeline? How close can you plant, should you plant to a pipeline?
I don't know if we have the answer to that question. There is a 25-foot building setback from the pipeline easement, so they would not be planting in the pipeline itself. They could be planted within that building setback to where they're not going to be planted over top of the pipeline itself. You look on what's on the screen right now, you can see at least along that angled property line, there's a 25-foot building setback to where the trees have to be planted on this property. So they can't be planted in the pipeline, and they would have to be planted within 10 feet of the property line.
Do we have any other questions of staff from the commission? Mr. Warren? Oh. Okay, if there is no further questions, we'll now call on the agent or applicant, and you will have 10 minutes. Please state your name and address.
Good afternoon, Phil Meyer with Baughman Company, agent for the applicant. With me here today is John Amrine with the KPC Pipeline Company. If you have any specific questions for John, he'll be glad to answer those. So this, per staff's report, this project was approved through a conditional use permit for a major utility to allow this regulator. We are putting this regulator in for service to Kansas Gas. They're looking to improve their service in West Sedgwick County. So this regulator will be used to sell gas to Kansas Gas Company that's serving it here in town. They were looking for a location of where to do this when Kansas Gas got a hold of them. They always felt like this particular location, one, is convenient, being right by the pipelines, which you need to do. Two, it was a little triangular piece of property that didn't have any other use with the development. It was always going to be open space. So it worked well for the pipeline company to do the regulator at this location. We would have asked during the conditional use permit that we waive the landscaping on the north and south property line because we knew that was always an issue for us. But at that point in time, we can't do that through the conditional use permit. Planning Commission can't do that through the conditional use permit. So we had to come back to this step and do it through the BZA. So within this 100-foot pipeline, and Baughman's used to dealing with this pipeline as any consultant is in town. I've run into it in Bel Air, all the way through Goddard. We've hit it a lot over the years. There are 4 pipelines in this 100-foot easement at this location. So Phillips Pipeline Company has 2 pipelines, a 12 and a 16-inch on the north and south end. KPC has 2 8-inch pipelines in the middle. And KPC will be tapping one of those and coming over here, doing the regulator at this location. Trees next to the pipeline. So we'll do these one at a time. Trees along the south property, we would have to move this fence in 5 feet to do the trees here. And those trees are going to be very close to Phillips Pipeline Company. So the city or both pipeline companies have a concern about planting trees along this south just due to the proximity to their own pipes. Along the north line, we would have to move that down 5 feet to put the trees in there, which we can do. But we're losing clearance and we're tight. So the way this regulator is set up, and John can come do all the specifics as he did to me yesterday in the office, through federal requirements, they have to have certain separations between each of these pieces in this regulator, and they need circulation around them. So from a functional standpoint, somebody from one of the 2 pipeline companies will show up at this site at least once a week. There will be 52 to 60 visits a year. They're required by federal law to do that. They'll come in, they'll check out the facility and make sure everything's clean. The issue they have with trees adjacent to these is during storms and stuff, the branches and sometimes just accumulation of leaves after they've grown a lot cause a problem for them to maintain that. That entire area inside the fence will be gravelled and it will be regularly sprayed to keep grass and weeds and treelets from growing inside that area. So we would have to scoot the fences in to do the landscape on that. With this, the north property line here at 252 feet would require 6 shade trees along the north property line. The south one at 286 would require 7 trees for a total of 13 trees that would be required as a buffer at those locations. along 167th for our street yard, we're required 2.5 trees. We have offered in this 7 trees in there, which is a 2.8, or I'm going to say a 3 multiplier of what is required. So we tripled up the landscape requirement on 167th, hoping that the BZA finds that a better location to do the screening along 167th, where most of the citizens will be driving up and down there. If you would like us to increase that to a 4 multiplier or something, we can do that. They intentionally are trying not to do shade trees there. They asked me to originally make it all evergreen, which is their preference, that they all be evergreen, because that's the least damage that can happen to their regulator facility. But we went ahead and did some ornamental trees mixed in with that just to give it a little bit of character. So we have loaded our landscape requirement along 167th, hoping that the BZA would be willing to waive the north and south buffer requirement in doing that. So to the south, there's a 25-foot building setback also on the south side. It didn't show up on the exhibit, but on the south side. So from the structure that's going to be built on lots 1, 2, and 3 Block A, there's a minimum of 125 feet to the fence that's there. Going to the north, there's 100 foot to the drive that serves the Goddard School District, about 150 foot to the existing parking lot, 400 foot to the school building itself. We're thinking those distances are adequate buffer, and the landscaping is not necessary in those locations, just due to the amount of open space that's available. So with that, I'll answer any questions the BZA has. John can handle any technical questions you have. We're requesting that you approve this today based on the findings of facts that we submitted with our application.
Any questions from the commission? Yes, Ms. Foster.
Is there some reason why you can't put the trees inside the fence?
Yes, because that whole fence to fence will be gravelled. There's not mowing or maintenance or anything that happens with inside that fence. They're going to gravel that and use chemical treatments on it to keep vegetation from growing in there. And as a operating rule by the pipeline company, they do not do landscaping inside the fences of their equipment.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of the agent? Not, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone present from the public that would like to speak on this case? If not, I'll bring it back to the board for discussion and action. Yes, Mr. Bill Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to accept the applicant's request to non-landscaping on the north and south, since they did do considerably more landscaping on the west.
Second, Mr. Chairman, could you, for the movement, could you also specify, if this is your desire, that all 5 elements of a variance have been met in this case?
Yes, I specify that.
I basically agree with the applicant on that. Yes.
Second. Okay, we have a motion for Mr. Bill Johnson, a second for Mr. Warren. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 With that, we will adjourn the BZA meeting and return to the MAPC meeting. And according to my notes, we are back to subdivision case 2.1. Call on staff to present.
Good afternoon, Greg Sharon, planning staff, here to present subdivision 2023 42, Pegasus Edition. This is the final plat approval. The preliminary plat was approved on October 19th of 2023. Next screen, please. Is located on the southeast corner of Pawnee Road and South Webb Road. This is a plat for 149 residential lot subdivision. Next plat screen. And this is the final subdivision plat up on the screen. I will go through staff comments. Item A requires, Public Works requires water and sanitary sewer to be extended to all lots and blocks. Item C, city and county stormwater management have approved the drainage concept for this subdivision. Item D, traffic calming elements are required along Airman, Flightman, and Zulu. Also auxiliary turn lanes onto the adjacent right-of-ways are required. Item J, city fire. Since both Airman Circle and Flightman Circle are over 500 feet, the fire code requires a 26-foot fire access road over 500 feet. In lieu of the access roads, the applicant has requested and provided 53-foot radius cul-de-sacs. The Wichita Fire Department will not accept the 53 cul-de-sacs in lieu of the 26-foot fire access roads. A bump out of 26 feet with a hydrant in the area where the 20-foot drainage utility easement is located is suggested. There will also be additional hydrants required in both circles. And I know there has been emails going back and forth between fire department and the applicant that they are working on providing that turnaround to comply with fire request and requirement. Item K, approval will require waiver lot to depth wish ratio, lots 25, 26, block 2, and lots 5, 6, and 7, block 5. Subdivision regulations state that the maximum depth of all residential lots shall not exceed 2.5 times the width. Item Q, also a waiver will be needed for stub street not provided to adjacent unplatted property to the south. And item AA, Evergy will not need to request additional easements on the final plat. Item C, the applicant has platted 5-foot setbacks for all lots, which represents an adjustment of the zoning code standard of 6 feet for TF3 two-family district regulations. And item D, the applicant has platted 20-foot front setbacks for lots which represent an adjustment of the zoning code standard of 25 feet for the TF3 two-family district. Any questions? I'd be happy to answer.
Is there anyone on the commission that has a question?
I think my question will go to the applicant.
Okay, with that, we'll call on the applicant or agent to speak. You'll have 10 minutes. Please give us your name and address.
Good afternoon. My name is Will Clevenger with Garver here on behalf of the applicant. Address is 1995 Midfield Road, Wichita, Kansas, 67209. As Greg stated, item J, we've been in communication with fire department and have reached an agreement with the bump outs for additional space there in the mid-length of the cul-de-sacs. We're in agreement with the subdivision committee's recommendation for approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Ms. Foster.
So access on the southeast corner seems to be lacking, especially given that a stream seems to go through the middle on the east side. and there's no connection to the south and no connection to the east on the southern part of this. Was there some reason why?
So the property to the south has a long driveway and it's kind of bisected with the residence that's in there. And I believe that was the reason why there was no connection that was going to be projected to the south. And then as far as on the east property line, we are providing the one connection to the east on Carson Street that's required by subdivision regulations. In interest to safety, we did want to provide an extra connection at the southeast corner that would be for emergency access use and that it would be gated. And that was the reason for that.
Is there any reason why that southeast crosswind court connection wasn't simply the same as the northeast Carson Street?
Yes.
On Stubb Street?
Yes, that was because of concerns with our client with circulation of extra traffic from when this property is developed down in the future. And then the same with traffic from this development going over. That was the reason for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the agent? If not, is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on this case? Anyone from the public here? If not, we will bring it back to the agent. You've got 3 minutes rebuttal. No? No rebuttal. No comment, sorry. Okay, then we'll bring it to the commission for further discussion and action.
Mr. Chairman, we had quite a bit of discussion about this at subdivision and we finally agreed with what we approved. So I moved to approve.
Second. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, could you include the 2 waivers that are required in the motion?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Bill Johnson, second by Mr. Aldrich. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Nay.
Motion carries. So the next case is 4.1. Call on staff to make a presentation.
Yes, good afternoon. Brad Etherly, planner for MAPD. We are here today to discuss Con 2023-00046. This case was previously heard at the MAPC on October 12th, 2023. This board recommended approval of both the conditional use and the waiver that is requested, subject to the conditions stated in the agenda report. It then went to the Board of County Commissioners on December 6th, 2023. And at that meeting, the Board of County Commissioners referred the case back to the MAPC for additional considerations, which I will give more detail on soon. The applicant is requesting a conditional use to permit an event center in the county with a waiver of supplementary use regulation number 7 found in Article 3D.6.NN of the Unified Zoning Code. This regulation requires a 100-foot setback from residential zoning. Staff also recommends amending this waiver to apply only to the current existing buildings that are on the property. Any new buildings constructed in the future would have to comply with the supplementary use regulation in full. The request is for a piece of property that is 7.07 acres in size. It is zoned RR, rural residential, and is generally located east of South 127th Street East and north of East 39th Street South. The applicant does own the property surrounding the parcel in question, which is over 40 acres in size total. The parcel in question is accessed by a 1,200 foot plus long drive that you can see this lot right here encompasses that comes off of South 127th East. The discussion at the Board of County Commissioners meeting included a number of items, including noise, dust control, screening, lighting, and starting times of events. After that meeting, staff convened and compiled several new conditions for the applicant, which include: one, the applicant shall improve the surface of the drive from South 127th Street East by paving with asphalt or concrete or treating the drive with dust mitigating treatments as needed. Two, the applicant shall provide adequate landscaping along the north property line of the drive, seen here, to the subject property and along the west property line of the subject property here as a buffer from possible dust and noise. Number three, all lighting shall be downcast and shall not encroach into neighboring properties and be limited to 15 feet in height when within 200 feet of residential zoning districts as per the Unified Zoning Code. Number four, no event shall begin before 10 a.m. on any day. It should be noted that the applicant is requesting for this to be changed to 8 a.m. and the applicant is here, so I will let him discuss why they want that. Number five, noise levels shall not exceed 83 decibels at any property line. And number six, the applicant shall maintain the landscape berm located on the south property line as needed, going along this south property line all the way to 127th. These conditions are in addition to the already discussed and approved conditions found in the agenda report. The property itself was platted in 2013 as part of the Twin Mill Estates Edition. If you go to we're at the zoning map. If you look at the north property, it is zoned SF20 with agriculture as the use. The south is zoned RR with single family residences as the use. Properties to the east is vacant. And then property to the west is zoned RR, rural residential with agriculture. However, it is currently being platted for large residential lots. South 127th Street East is a gravel two-lane county arterial. Sidewalks do not serve the site. Water is provided to the site by Rural Water District Number 3, and the subject site utilizes a lagoon for on-site sewer. If we can go to the future growth map, please. The proposed conditional use is in conformance with the 2035 Wichita Future Growth Concept Map. The map identifies the subject site as agricultural or vacant within the Wichita urban growth area, which encompasses areas that are undeveloped or used for agricultural production. Pockets of low density residential uses without the full range of municipal services likely will be developed in these areas. And the proposed conditional use is in conformance with the plan's locational guidelines. The subject site directly abuts rural scale residential, but incorporates buffering to transition and scale from an event center to single family residences with a large distance between the uses, a heavily landscaped berm, and a tree line around the applicant's property, along with the conditions that are recommended. Therefore, the approval of this request would be consistent with this component of the plan. Design guidelines also suggest that non-residential uses should have site design features that limit traffic, noise, lighting, and adverse impacts on surrounding residential land uses. We believe that the conditions listed will handle that portion of the guidelines. If we can go to the site pics. This is the overhead aerial of the property. This is looking at the building that will be used for the event center. Next picture. This is looking north. Again, on the left-hand side is the event center. This is another building that has been constructed that is not part of this request, but next picture. This is the proposed parking area for the event center to the south. Next picture. Just looking west again with the event center here on the left. Next picture. This is looking south. This is the applicant's residence. To the south, you see the landscape berm with single family dwellings behind. Next picture. Just another close up of the landscape berm that separates the single family dwellings from the applicant's residence. Next picture. This is looking west across South 127th. Next picture. This is looking east. This is looking west, looking down the long drive that leads to the applicant's residence. Next picture. And this is looking east down that drive. You can see the heavily landscaped portions that surround the drive. Next picture. This is looking north from South 127th from the drive, and I think one last picture. This is looking south from 127th. And based upon the information available at the time the staff report was prepared, it is recommended that the request along with the waiver for existing buildings be approved. Subject to the conditions listed in the staff report, this recommendation is based on the golden rules. Staff has not received any additional comments since this, from the public since this board met previously. And with that, I can stand for any questions.
Thank you. Scott.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'd like to add on just a little bit as part of the staff presentation that on the condition regarding the berm and the maintenance of the berm, that we can only require, as part of this case, it can only be required that the applicant would maintain the portion of the berm that is on their property. So I just want to clarify that the condition, the intent of that condition is that they would be required to maintain the berm on their portion of property. The second thing is that noise and event centers in the county is an ongoing and evolving conversation right now. We just had one just yesterday that was at the county commission. There was a lot of good discussion about it. And because of that, I'd like to have Kelly Dixon, if we could, sir, come up and speak just a little bit about the enforcement related to the decibels condition. I'd like him to speak about their ability to monitor that, because again, this is a evolving conversation and we've learned quite a bit just in the time with this case and that one.
Mr. Aldridge.
Yeah, before we get to that, I've got a quick question regarding that. What is the county code regulation presently for noise and loud lighting?
I'll defer to Kelly on that as well.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Kelly Dixon, Metropolitan Area Building. To answer that question, we currently have no noise enforcement, no noise requirements in Sedgwick County, unincorporated.
Then how can you try to set a standard for something that doesn't exist?
Which is the reason I think I was asked to be up here today. Because we don't have an ordinance, we don't have the ability to verify noise levels. We don't have the equipment. We also do not work the hours that an event center might be in violation of that, which that would then require Sedgwick County Sheriff's officers to respond. My understanding is they don't have the equipment either, probably nor the manpower, but I can't speak for them specifically. So a noise requirement on there would be very difficult and for the most part unenforceable, at least on from the zoning enforcement side of the Sedgwick County.
Then they probably should be removed as recommendations.
I'll leave that to you.
Are there any other questions from the commission of staff or of Kelly? Yes.
Does the city have an ordinance noise level? Don't they?
My understanding is the city does have a noise ordinance. And I'm not 100% sure, but I think maybe some of the police officers actually have the ability to check those levels. But since we don't have a noise ordinance in the county, no one in the county does.
We've had a number of cases that we've dealt with noise before in the city. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, I'm sure they have.
And sir, I would point out that Kelly is with MAPC and that they do zoning enforcement only for the county.
that zoning enforcement for the city is done through the planning department. And as Kelly has indicated, yes, we do rely on the police department for assistance when it comes to the noise issues.
Any other questions?
Shouldn't the noise level be the same? I mean, regardless of how they're enforced, shouldn't they be the same?
That is an area of discussion right now, I believe, with the county commission at a high level about how are event centers in the unincorporated county regulated? How should they be treated in the future?
Any other questions of? If not, is there anyone from the public present who would like to speak on this? Oh, I'm sorry, agent or applicant. Yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself. Please give us your name and your address, and you'll have 10 minutes.
Thank you. Vince Burnett, 3800 South, 127th Street East. I am the applicant. My daughter's also present, who's also an applicant on this conditional use. Obviously, we've been here before. We've been up to the Board of County Commissioners, and now we're back here. As far as the conditions that were added at the Board of County Commissions, noting the decibel level, that outside of that, the only concern that we had with some of the discussions at the Board of County Commissions was the start time at 10 a.m. Obviously, we want this to be an event venue, not necessarily relegated to a wedding venue. And I think at the time I wasn't thinking, well, if you have a conference that you want to have in the building, a start time of 10 a.m. is probably not particularly feasible. Our vision is, my daughter is a mental health provider. She's talked about, had solicitations about having conferences for mental health. My son is a Wichita police officer and is also a veteran, and it talked about having some type of conferences associated with Veterans Affairs. So obviously, we would like to see if the committee could adjust the start time to more of an 8 a.m. as opposed to a 10 a.m. Myself being an attorney, I've been to tons of conferences and they seldom start at 10 o'clock. But obviously, we're subject to the committee's position on that. I just know that the conferences would be more in the building. Wouldn't be any amplified music. At best, you're going to have a speaker with a microphone at best. And so that's why we asked for the 8 a.m. I know that Commissioner Howell was more concerned, as I read the minutes and was present, if the ending time for like wedding venues is midnight, then there's no start time. He mentioned, well, somebody could start an event at 12:30 a.m. I just don't see that as realistic. I think what we'd like to see is more of directed towards conference, so that we are a full service event center, not again relegated to weddings. Thank you.
Okay, now, are there any questions from the commission? Mr. Aldridge.
Sir, do you know approximately the height of the berm that's existing there?
Are you talking about the berm on the south side of the property?
Yeah, yes.
It's about 6 feet. I've never measured it. I have to have one of those devices to do an actual measurement, but there's lots of foliage. I know one of the photographs actually showed it pretty well, and you can, when you're at the road level, you can see the top of the house to the south, but you can't see above that. So I'm guessing it's around 5 or 6 feet.
And that would also probably act as a bit of a buffer when it comes to noise also, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Would you be supportive of or okay with a 9 o'clock start time and instead of an 8 o'clock?
That would be better than 10, yes. And obviously we can work around that. I just know that 10 seemed like pretty late if you're going to have an actual conference. But sure, whatever the committee concludes.
I also know that the recommendation is to either provide paving, asphalt, concrete, or treating the drive with a dust, mitigating the treatment as needed. Would you say you're gonna have more traffic or less traffic than on 127th that is also dirt?
Well, I've been present for the plating of that division that's developing straight to the west of us. And I know that the car count is 200, over 200 per day on 127th. Obviously, if we have an event, there's going to be some traffic. It certainly, I would think, would be less than the traffic that is already present on 127th that has been apparently measured in excess of 200 cars per day.
And there doesn't seem to be any requirements for paving or concrete or dust, reduction on 127, does there?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There any other discussion from commission members? Yes, Mr. Warren.
Sir, you heard sorry about that.
That's all right.
You heard the concerns about noise, and there's no ordinances out there. In an effort to keep friends in the neighborhood, do you have a plan to regulate noise on your own?
Yes, and that was discussed at the first meeting. If you look at the building, it is not just a metal building with thin walls. It's actually a concrete building, and it has plywood in the inside. And I know you don't have photographs of the inside. And it also has a ceiling. So even though you see I don't know what you call them, dampers or whatever those are on top of the event, that ceiling is enclosed because it's got heaters up there for a heating source. So obviously I'm concerned about that. And we will certainly investigate that. Perhaps there's something you can put inside the walls that would dampen noise, but based on its construction, I would be real surprised how much you can hear outside of the building when the music is contained inside the building.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? Thank you for your testimony. Are there anybody present from the public here that would like to speak on this? Is there anyone present from the public who wants to speak? If not, I will bring it back to the commission for discussion and action.
I'd like to make a motion. We approve it subject to staff comments and an 8 o'clock allowable start time. Second.
Can I ask a
Yes,
question
Ms. Foster.
first? All right, so this is for our county attorney, Kurt. How does putting a condition on which is unenforceable at the moment, should we do that? Should we take that condition off? Should we leave it on the hopes that at some point the county gets the equipment they need to enforce it? What from a legal perspective is the reasonable thing to do here?
Kirk Sponsel, Deputy County Counselor. I think certainly the interest in decibels was expressed at the BOCC level. With that said, the MAPC, who would be an integral part of the enforcement, they're the ones who came up today and said that they don't have the mechanisms at this time. So realistically, any type of decibel readings, the requirement would be on us, and we obviously don't have that within our purview at this time. I can't tell you what you should or shouldn't do. If you want to remove this, you can.
Where do they get 83? Just made it up or what?
It was brought up during the Board of County Commissioners meeting based
I
on.
understand, but does he just make it up or do they get it somewhere?
The individual indicated that they based it on their experience working with decibel levels.
I have a question for the motion maker. Would he be willing to revise the motion to strike item number 3, item number 5, additional to the revision of the time that that you requested.
Mr. Joe Johnson, you made the motion.
Strike the noise regulation or condition to reduce, excuse me, the condition to not allow noise levels to exceed 83 decibels since we have no way of enforcing it. Would you be willing to strike that condition?
And also
From the
condition
list?
number 3.
Wait a minute, that's the lighting?
Yeah, there's no way to enforce that, either one of them.
What's your pleasure on that?
I think lighting is not dynamic. You put the fixtures in and if they're down lights, they're down lights. I'm a
I
little
don't
less.
have any problem leaving them in. Someday we might be able to enforce them.
And Kirk Sponsel, Deputy County Councilor, just dealing with the lighting portion. I believe that was actually pulled from another more general part of the Unified Zoning Code. And so my recommendation is that we not be waiving that because that is an actual requirement.
I'll rescind my comment on that.
Thank
But
you.
I think that we need to revise the condition number 5 regarding the noise level, since there is no mechanism in place on the county, for even to suggest that condition or enforcement. It shouldn't even be in there.
I don't want to disagree with you, but a private individual who complains could bring in a noise meter and check it and then make a complaint.
I should say I asked the question, but I asked the question to find out the legal perspective on it. I am personally inclined to leave it in there because it's fixable. The county can go out and buy the equipment they need or make some other arrangement to enforce it should they decide they need to.
But they do not have a policy enforced now or in place now. So how can you restrict somebody from doing something that they don't even have? It's like charging somebody with a violation of the law and there's no law in place on that.
Well, it's not enforceable right now. Ms. Miles, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
Well, I really think that we ought to allow him to start events at 7:30. I'm much less concerned about the events in the morning. If he's going to have an 8 o'clock event, people are going to start showing up at 7:30 and I wouldn't want to see him in violation. I'm much less concerned about morning events, a breakfast or something like even a conference than I am about late night events.
Here.
Okay, let's bring this back. We have a motion for Mr. Joe Johnson on this. Do we have a second to his motion? And then somebody can make a substitute motion if they want to.
And Kirk Sponsel, Deputy County Councilor, just a point of clarification. So at this time, the motion on the table is move to approve with the conditions as presented by the MAPD, with the exception that the events, no event shall begin before 8 a.m. on any day. Does that motion also include a waiver of supplementary use regulation 3D6 NN7 for existing structures?
Yes.
Thank you.
I will amend my motion to start at 7:30. I would never get up there.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Williams Bay second. Mr. Aldrich.
I'd like to make a substitute motion that includes what the main motion was just now, but removing recommendation number 6 regarding the applicant shall maintain, number 5, that the noise level should not exceed decibels on any property line, that be stricken.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, substitute motion by Mr. Aldrich, second by Mr. Blick. We'll vote on the substitute motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Nay.
Nay.
We want a voice count.
Yes, sir, if we can. So this is the substitute motion. It is the one with the modification from the main motion from the first motion, which the substitute would remove the requirement for the noise level to not exceed 83 decibels at any property line, which is condition number 5. And that the start time would be 7:30 AM.
Yeah, the only changes in the substitute motion would be striking requirement number 5 regarding the noise level. Everything else would be the same.
Correct. Let's go ahead with voice count.
Okay, yes, sir. Dool,
Yes.
Foster,
Yes.
McKay,
Yes.
Green is not, sorry. Okay, Bill Johnson,
Yes.
Blick,
Yes.
Nix,
Yes.
Fox, no, Warren,
Yes.
Joe Johnson,
In the spirit of getting along, I'll say yes.
Miles,
No.
Zimmelman, Aldridge,
Yes.
Williams Bay.
Yes.
So I show 11 in favor and 2 opposed.
Motion carries. So we will move on to the next case, which is 4.2. Calling staff to give us a report. Thank you.
Yes, again, Brad Etherly, Planning Department. This case is case number CUP 2023-00049. In this instance, the applicant is requesting an amendment to CUP DP 320 to adjust parcel boundaries on parcel number 1 and parcel 8, and to remove warehouse self-storage use on parcel 8 and to allow warehouse self-storage on parcel 1. They are also asking for a waiver to supplementary use regulation number 17 found in Article 3D.6.y. And I'll get into that in a little bit. This CUP comprises 51.13 acres of property and is generally located south of West Kellogg Drive at US 54 and is zoned LC Limited Commercial District. If we can go to the site plan. The applicant is requesting to amend the parcel boundaries of parcel 1 and parcel 8. You can see parcel 1 just to the north of parcel 8 here. And then this would increase the area of parcel 1 and reduce the area of parcel 8. They are also asking to remove the use of warehouse self-storage from parcel 8 and move it to parcel 1. This amendment would also allow all uses allowed in the TF3 to be permitted on parcel 8. Per general provision number 12, parcel 1 would be required to include a 6 to 8 foot high screening wall along the west property line, and screening consisting of evergreen landscaping, wrought iron, or similar decorative fencing, and storage building walls if developed with self-storage. If not, screening shall be constructed along south property line of parcel 1 where adjacent to residential uses. The applicant is also requesting a waiver to supplementary use regulation number 17 of Article 3.6.6.y, requiring a manager to reside on site. CUP DP 320 is comprised of 7 parcels, all 7 zoned LC Limited Commercial. Parcel 6 is the only parcel that has begun development, which is right here. And that is being developed with duplexes, and it's a 16.56 acre parcel. In 2021, parcel 7 was removed from CUP DP 320. Looking at the zoning map, please. If you go across West Kellogg and Highway 54 to the north, this property is zoned GC with an antique mall and self-storage as a use. South of the property is zoned SF20 with the Prairie Sunset Trail shared use path, and then single family residential below. To the east is PUD 89, which is currently being developed with duplexes. And to the west is SF20, single family, and PUD 47, which is undeveloped or agricultural uses. West Kellogg Drive is a paved 2-lane frontage road with no sidewalks. Wichita Transit does not provide regular bus service to the area, but municipal water and sewer are available to the site. History of the property: in 2009, the property was rezoned from SF 20 to LC, and the Dugan West Kellogg CUP DP 320 was established. Additionally, in 2009, the property was platted as the Dugan West Kellogg Commercial Edition. In 2020, the property was replatted as the Dugan West Kellogg Commercial Second Edition, which created the residential lots on parcel 7, along with reserves A and B. In 2021, the west portion of the site was replatted as the Dugan West Kellogg Commercial Third Edition, creating the residential lots on parcel 6. In 2021, the CUP was amended to remove parcel 7, reserve A and reserve B to permit warehouse self-storage service on parcel 8, and to allow an off-site billboard sign, and to align the CUP with the replat referenced before. If you go to the future growth map, you can see that the amendment is in conformance with Community Investments Plan, which identifies the subject property as appropriate for residential and employment mix. The use of warehouse self-storage service was already permitted by right on parcel 8 by the general provisions. Moving the permitted use to parcel 1 will not negatively impact the surrounding neighborhood. Allowing all uses permitted in the TF3 district will match the existing residential development nearby for parcel 8. If we can go to the site photos. It's a very foggy morning when I went out to take these pictures, but this is looking south from West Kellogg Frontage Road onto the property. Next picture. This is looking north from the property. Next picture. This is looking west into the property. Next picture. This is looking east away from the property. Next picture. And this is looking southeast into the duplex development that's currently going on. And I think that is all of the pictures. Based upon the information available at the time, staff report was prepared. The staff report was prepared. As recommended, the request be approved, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report. It is recommended that the request for the waiver to supplementary use regulation number 17 be denied. These recommendations are based on the golden rules, and at this point, staff has received no public comments. And then with that, I can stand for any questions.
Questions of staff from the commission? There's no, yes, Mr. Blick.
So basically parcel 8 was going to be a self-storage, and now it's looking like it's going to be, they're wanting to turn it into residential.
Correct.
And then now when we did the signage that was on there, that was also part of that, wasn't it? Because of the self-storage was gonna.
Correct. And from what I could tell, it was actually off-site, further to the east at West Kellogg, where the drive from the highway kind of comes to the frontage road.
So is that gonna have to change then also?
It doesn't have to. That's not part of the request. So, I mean, I think that staff is fine with keeping that as part of the general provision.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of staff? If not, we'll call on the agent or applicant. You'll have 10 minutes. Please state your name and address.
My name is Jay Cook with Boffman Company. I'm here so you don't have to look at Phil Meyer all the time. If you'll go back to the zoning around this subject property, I'd appreciate it. I know staff has approved or recommended approval for the changing in lots 1 and 8. What I really want to talk about is the supplemental use that we're trying to have waived. If this property were north of Kellogg, quarter mile west of the property, or a half mile east, that supplemental regulation would not be required. we felt like it was kind of an economic burden on the property owner to have a resident manager on site. They're in agreement with the other 18 regulations that are there for warehouse use or self-storage use in the LC zoning. It's just this one that we're trying to have waived. There's no changes to signage or anything in this request, specifically to make it to where the self-storage is going to be at the perimeter at the front of the property as opposed to lot 8, and then moving lot 8 down to allow for some more 2-family houses. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. One more before you ask. Just thought about this. One of the reasons why we feel that the intent of the resident manager obviously would be for security around residential areas for the storage unit. We think with technology today and gates and cameras that this is maybe a bit of an undue burden on the applicant or on the actual owner. So if you have any questions, I'd love to answer.
That was going to be my question. Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? Not, thank you for your comments. Is there anyone from the public here that would like to speak on this case? Is there anyone present from the public that would like to speak? If not, we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion and action. Yes, Mr. Aldridge.
I got a question for staff, just for my own knowledge. Is there a requirement to have a resident manager on site? Is that based on the size of a storage unit?
It's
No, I think it's a probably multifold reason, probably for safeties and security, but also for maintenance of the property as well.
And the supplementary use regulations that require are for warehouse self-storage units when they're in the LC or GO districts. That's where if warehouse self-storage was in a general commercial district, it would not require it. This is for LC and GO districts, with the understanding that typically LC and GO zoning is closer to residential properties possibly than a GC zoning district.
So you're going to require there to be some sort of security or person or something there at all hours, all times?
The zoning code is clear in stating it's a resident manager.
Because there's sites around town that or units around town that don't have on site now. So do they get a waiver on that, or?
It's hard to know depending on which one you're talking about.
Okay.
Any other questions of staff? Yes, Mr. Blick.
I just want clarification from staff. On the front of our packet actually shows where it's kind of large on the bottom towards the south, and then the square box. But then when I look inside the site plan, it's actually flipped 180. Is that the correct one, or is the front of the document on page 13 looks totally different? It's actually rotated 180 degrees.
So part of the request is that part of the amendment is to change the dimensions of the parcels. So what you're looking at on 13 is the proposed realigning of parcel boundaries to shrink parcel 8. That's why it's smaller on page 13, and parcel 1 is going to grow.
I just want to verify. Cool. Thank you.
No further questions. What is the decision of the commission? Like to have a motion?
I'd make a motion. Maybe I'll get by this time to approve it, subject to staff recommendations, with the exception of not requiring a resident manager.
A second.
Motion by Mr. Joe Johnson, second by Ms. Fox. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay. Motion carries. So now we'll hear a case, item 4.3. Call on staff to give us a presentation.
Yes, good afternoon. Brad Etherly again with MAPD. We are discussing PUD 2023-00015. In this instance, the applicant is requesting a zone change from RR Rural Residential to PUD to allow multiple single-family dwellings on one lot. This lot is 157.6 acres, currently zoned RR, generally located on the southwest corner of West 39th Street South and South 263rd Street West. Currently, it is developed with 7 single-family dwellings, 3 pools, and a club. All buildings were constructed prior to the county classifying the lot as RR at some point in the 1980s. These are all considered non-conforming structures. Current zoning laws would prohibit any new construction without subdividing or rebuilding existing buildings if more than 50% or more of the fair market value is damaged. The current buildings are situated so that meeting required lot size and dimensions of the current zoning laws would be impossible according to the applicant. The applicant has proposed up to 20 single-family dwellings with up to 20 accessory apartments. Staff believes that classifying these as accessory apartments is unnecessary and is willing to allow up to 40 single-family dwellings on the lot. This would be equal to 1 dwelling unit per 3.94 acres, which is less dense than the required 1 dwelling per 2 acres that the UZC requires. Therefore, it meets and exceeds the UZC's minimum requirements for density. Access is being proposed by 3 points on West 39th Street South and 3 points on South 263rd Street West. These points are not indicated on the site plan other than what is currently existing. Staff does recommend that parking be per the UZC. The applicant is proposing that signage be allowed as by right in the rural residential district by the Sedgwick County Sign Code. The general provisions do not specify any screening requirements. Staff recommends that no screening be required based on the size of the lot and the large amount of vegetation that exists. The applicant has requested that any lagoons or septic systems be allowed to be shared between buildings. The staff would, staff would identify that each building be separate, which would mean sharing of systems would not be permitted. If we can go to the zoning map. Oh, we are at the zoning map. It was all the same color. It was throwing me off. If you see the to the north, it is zoned RR rural residential and is agricultural in use. To the south is rural residential with single family dwellings. To the east is rural residential with agriculture and a single family dwelling. To the west is rural residential with agriculture. There have been no zoning cases associated with this property. If we can go to the future growth map. The requested zone change is in conformance with the plan's 2035 Wichita Future Growth Concept Map. This map identifies the area to be appropriate for rural area, agricultural uses, rural-based businesses, and larger lot residential ex-urban subdivisions likely will be developed here. Up to 40 single-family dwellings on a 157.6 acre lot, such as that proposed in the PUD, is an appropriate use of the land considering that the existing 7 dwellings were built prior to current zoning codes. The proposed rezoning is in conformance with the land use compatibility locational guidelines. Guideline 4.b states that urban density development is discouraged from locating in rural areas, and rural density development should be located in accordance to the urban fringe development standards. The proposed density at its peak of 40 homes on one lot would be equal to 1 dwelling per unit per 3.954 acres, which is well below the minimum of 1 dwelling per 2 acres. If we can go to the site photos. This is on South 263rd Street, looking west onto the property. Next picture. This is looking north away from the property. Next picture. This is looking east away from the property. Next picture. This is looking south away from the property. Based upon the information available at the time of the staff report was prepared, it is recommended that the request be approved subject to the conditions in the staff report. This recommendation is based on the golden rules. And at this time, staff has received no public comments, although it did field questions from one member of the public on a phone call. And with that, I can stand for any questions.
Mr. Aldridge.
The site property and all the buildings been on sitting there for 44 years, correct?
I don't know exactly how long they've been there, but it was prior to the county zoning. This is rural residential at some point in the 80s. So,
and you've got a lot of natural buffer all the way around there, a lot of trees and everything else. And probably the reason why you hadn't had anybody speak on this, there isn't anybody around there. That's way out in the country.
Any other questions of staff from the commission? Not, I'll call on the agent or applicant to speak. State your name and address, and you will have 10 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, my name is Greg Ferris. I represent the family that has a corporation that owns this property. I think I gave some misinformation earlier. They've actually owned this property since 1923. At that time, there were already 2 houses on this property, and subsequent to that, some of the family built some other homes. There are now 7 existing homes. When another family member attempted to construct a home on this property, they were denied because the zoning is rural residential, only allows 1 house. They didn't even realize that they had been rezoned back in the 80s to make all of their structures non-conforming, so that if there was extensive damage to one of these homes, they couldn't even rebuild it because they're non-conforming. Well, obviously that, plus the desire to rebuild, to build a couple new homes along here was a concern. They tried to look out as far as they could and say, how many would there ever be? The number they arrived at was that they would never have more than 20 houses on this. Staff decided that it would be 40 instead of allowing accessory structures to not be included. We don't have any problem with that. It's kind of whether you say A or B, we're fine with that. This is really unusual because these folks were cast into a situation where they had to spend a lot of money to be allowed to do what they've been doing for a number of years. They met with staff. Staff suggested to them that really the only direction they could go was to try to subdivide this. And if they subdivided it, there would be maybe allowed to do 88 units, but they have some issues because some of the houses are not on 2-acre parcels. So they really were caught in a catch-22 that was of no fault of their own. So what we're asking here is for a planned unit development. And what that planned unit development says is that you can only do you have to follow the rural residential rules. You can't do commercial, you can't do multifamily, you can't do all of that. But what we are asking is that there are a few exceptions to that, and that's what you see in front of you in your PUD regulations. As you know, a PUD has to cite certain regulations because it creates its own zoning. But by restricting it to rural residential, we have placed significant restrictions on this property that shouldn't cause any issues in the area. So this will continue to be used exactly the way it's been used for the past nearly 100 years. So there's not really any change. There's a couple areas that staff has recommended that we would like to modify. I've met with Kelly Dixon beforehand. Number 7, and the reason again is there are already 2 or 3 of these houses that share a septic system. They do that today. So if you incorporate number 7 the way staff is proposing it, they would have to go out and build new septic systems. So that wasn't the intent of staff. Staff wants
any new construction to have their own septic. We don't have any problem with that. So I would ask instead of number 7 that you go back to my language, take out the word not and put in unless new construction or existing septic systems are replaced. And I believe you can ask Mr. Dixon, I believe he's okay with that. Also in number 5, when they crossed out the accessory structure language, it creates a bit of a issue with the actual language in number 5, so that I would ask that number 5 read no more than 40 primary structures and or accessory apartments be allowed, which I believe is what staff's intention was there. But when you go to the 3rd sentence, you do need to then say accessory structures as defined by the Unified Zoning Code. You have to strike out do not, because it doesn't make sense then. But they do count as the total number of structures. And I believe that was what staff's intent was from the language as I talked to staff earlier, or actually at the end of last week. The other thing we'd like to cross out is number 12. We don't believe it's necessary. This is a large parcel, and if they build houses, there's plenty of room for parking or whatever else there needs to be. The Unified Zoning Code has a lot of stipulations that they don't have today. We don't believe that they need to be enforced on them in the future. With that, I would be glad, and the family that has kind of been the designate of the family to speak on their behalf is here. If you have any any specific questions, but with that, I'll be glad to answer any of your questions.
Are there any questions from commission members? Mr. Blick.
Question, if they did have to build additional lagoons and all that, they would have to pretty much go south. And now they're gonna possibly be driving over their lines and everything because all the drives are coming up through the south side. Do you see that same thing also?
Yes, and really, our goal was anything that's there existing today would not be impacted. They should be allowed to do what they've been doing for 100 years. Anybody new coming in is likely to be built on either some of that parcel further to the west or on the north side. If they have to build their own septic systems, that's a little different situation, and we understand that they're doing new construction. And Mr. Dixon did ask, and I did talk to the family, that if those existing septic systems that are being shared need to be replaced, that they might have to be separated or get permission from him otherwise. And we don't have any problem with the language that would allow the director of the the MABCD to waive that. So I'm fine with that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Mr. Joe Johnson.
Yeah. If a lagoon just has to be cleaned out, that's not replacing it, right?
Correct. And this is really on the septic systems. I believe you can ask Kelly, but I believe that's what you're talking about.
Any other questions from commission? No, thank you. We will ask if there is anybody from the public here that would like to speak on this case.
Yes.
Please go to the podium and give us your name and address, and you will have 3 minutes.
Hello, James Vestring. My mother Joyce is a property owner of the property that borders the southeast corner of Clear Lake Estates. I will be speaking on her behalf. Is that okay, I suppose? At potential risk of losing the privacy reasonably expected living in a rural residential zoned area, we are opposed to the petition zoning change request from rural residential to planned unit, which by definition could be an almost infinite possibility of buildings and uses. The Vestring family would like to avoid a recent situation happening to our neighbor to our south, who in my limited understanding had his privacy expectations infringed upon by the allowance of a party venue, allowing hundreds of people and potential nuisances in his backyard. In reading this notice of a public hearing, the request states to permit multiple existing dwellings on one parcel of land, which appears to be consistent with the content of the letter received from the property owners. So as neighbors to the Clear Lake residents, their desire to add additional family member homes seems quite reasonable. My family requests the zoning committee, in lieu of rezoning the entire 160-acre parcel, to consider the other avenues, such as grandfathering, non-conforming use, conditional use, variance, administrative approval, after which a rezoning to a PUD unit is deemed necessary, would ask the minimum acres of the 160 acres to be rezoned. Conscious of the fact that needs of the public and expansion is imminent, this request for rezoning is inconsistent with the surrounding area. Thank you.
Just a minute. I have a question. Yes, could you point out with the mouse where your mother's house is?
Oh, I don't. Getting oriented, I think. So is my mouse there? It's down this way here. To the south. Do you see my mouse? I guess, yeah. I don't see any other pictures.
So it's south of this particular picture, right?
Yeah, southeast across 263rd on the east border.
Okay, so it's not contiguous.
No.
Yeah,
This main concern is just the PUD. The definition of a PUD is quite large. In my limited understanding of zoning.
Okay, are there any other members of the public here that would like to speak on this case? Please give us your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Robert Robin. I'm here on behalf of my wife, Sherry Robin, who is not able to be here. This land is in her trust, and she inherited from her father, who has owned it probably as long as this current family owned the land. We are located, we hit corners. We are southwest quarter of that section. So I don't know about the property, but wherever the property is.
Can you move the mouse, sir, on there to show us where it is on the screen?
Okay, we don't do this every day, but I'm going to, this here would be north. Okay, so we want to go south. So we should be right here. No, that's MacArthur. We're south. We're the southwest quarter of that section. So, but that's not even showing on here. We're on 47th.
You're gonna be down here.
Okay.
This is the
Okay,
quarter section.
that's it.
This
That's
is
it. Yep,
southwest.
yep. Okay. All right. So this is the property we own, which we primarily are farmers and run lots of cattle. My thing is, first of all, why the commission moved the houses from 20 to 40? Serious question for me. There's so many more people out there. What's it gonna do to our taxes? I've been there, I've done it. I know what happens to property that gets developed. No consideration for any of the other landowners. The other question is, and I'm not upset, sound like it, is that we run a lot of cattle. Pets, dogs, from all those people come out in our pastures. So we gotta put up with that. Dead calf. Wasn't my dog. It was. But the other thing is, why 20 to 40? We've got a pond near that property. Invariably, we've got to run people off of those ponds. And I know this family means well. They're just talking about their dwellings. I understand the money they spend. I understand the 7-home deal, but that's not our landowner's problem. I think a good idea was suggested. Commission homestead those 7 homes that were there. And give them permission to build something, but not develop it into. And I didn't have the opportunity to do the readings, but in part of the readings, 40 structures could be like the case you had a minute ago. or they're just gonna have religious meetings. That don't happen that way, people. You know that in real life. They get approved for this and then they go do that. Goes on every day in real life. Another case I had here was the ponds are near, we got livestock, cattle in the pasture awfully. There's lots of wildlife there. What's 20 more homes gonna do to the wildlife? You know, we got a party in charge right now that's kind of favor that. Trespassing, we have a problem with that all the time. Homes already here, we're out of compliance, you know, I feel for the family, I do, but you know, somebody's got to take hold of their own responsibility. It shouldn't be the responsibility of us landowners that are next to that property. Any questions of me?
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else in the public? Excuse me, sir, would you come back up? Ms. Fox?
You have cattle in that area. Do you have fencing for your livestock, or like, what, is there any kind of separation between?
Yes, there's the property that joins it where that pond is, that's a pasture. We have.
So you have fencing there?
Yes, there's fencing, yeah.
So where did the people come across to your ponds? I don't understand that part.
Well, first of all, they'll come right across, they go cat across the fence.
Oh, they climb the fence.
Sure. And in addition to that, they can park their road on someplace else. They can park it up there in their field and come across. And the ground right south of it is all grassland too.
Okay,
Gerlach's own that, and they've got cattle in it.
Any other questions of the speaker? Thank you, sir.
Great question.
Is there anyone else from the public?
Sure.
Excuse me. We got another
Sure.
question that popped up. Lon.
On the north side of your property, there's that a road going down to that pond area? Is that a road?
Not on our property. No, we have there's no road. You're talking probably coming off of 47th. There's no road going to that property, no. You're looking at that where it's kind of a wide area?
Yes.
No, that's probably more than likely where we stayed away from the fence to try to control rye. And to help the neighbors so his cattle don't reach through to eat wheat. Because he got a good fence in there. Tom does. Yeah, no, there's no roads. No roads going to that area.
Okay, thank you.
The problem we have here is we have another pond on that property that we got to run people out of there all the time. The other thing of it is, more people are going to get disturbed if we give someone permission to duck hunt. They get upset when those people are out there shooting at 4 o'clock in the morning. So there's other implications, you know, that come with that. But what I don't really understand is how the commission did this 40 unit deal. And it says swimming pools, buildings, structures, etc. Well, I mean, seriously, what does that mean? That means build another building like a case we had earlier. Then we're back to the same thing. I own property where they built a marriage facility. I know the rest of the story. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, is there anyone else from the public that would like to speak on this case? Anyone else? If not, we'll bring it back to the agent or applicant, and you'll have 2 minutes for rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to clarify a couple things. I understand the gentleman's concern. Certainly none of our people are going over to use his pond. You'll see we have a big, beautiful lake that is ours, and we're not going over. That's people that we have no control of. The people are wandering. That's going to happen. It's happening today. It's not going to change if we build some homes up in this area up here. So none of that is going to change his property. So that issue. He mentioned a venue. We're not allowed a venue. The PUD does not allow a venue. We're allowed rural residential. A venue, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, and rural residential requires a conditional use permit. So we would have to go through this process again, which they have no intention of doing, to do a venue. The other gentleman spoke of endless uses in the PUD. And, you know, that's true if you have a PUD that's open-ended and has endless uses. Our PUD is not open-ended. It is restricted to rural residential. So we don't have those endless uses that might come to mind if you did a research on a PUD, like maybe I did up at a Kellogg and Tyler, which is totally different than a PUD here that is strictly limited to rural residential. So because of those restrictions, we don't see an issue with anything that we're doing that will impact anything that's happening here. The additional houses that are going to be built, this corporation only allows family members on this property. So it would take a number of years, but because this is such an expensive process, they didn't want to have to come back each time they added a house for a family member. So that's why we looked and said, okay, we'll do 20. But most of these houses that are existing today already have an accessory structure. So we were concerned that if we didn't keep them separate, that we wouldn't be allowed to have that many. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Why did it take them 45 years? What happened to all the families that were?
Okay, now the discussion with the public is ended. Thank you for your comments. I want to bring it back now to the commission for discussion and.
Were there any questions for me?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I think 40 is great. There may be a lot more great grandchildren than you anticipate today.
Mr. Warren.
Mr. Ferris, could you clarify again some of the comments that you were hoping that?
I'm sorry, could you say it again, Mr. Warren?
Could you clarify some of the comments on the areas that you wanted to see changed in the condition?
Yes, sir. In number 7, we're asking that you take out the word not and replace and leave that in there, but add that any new or replacement septic systems would require the approval or would be required to have a new.
Couldn't we just say any new sewage lagoon and or septic system replacement may not be shared? Does that work?
But you still have to allow the existing sharing because that's not allowed in the zoning code. Yes, sir.
I think
any new, right?
Any new dwelling units, perhaps.
Yes. Any new dwelling units would require a new septic system, but otherwise sewage lagoons and our septic systems are allowed to be shared. It would be fine. The other was back in number 5, just trying, because they took out 6, you have to change that language a little bit so that after primary structures in the first sentence, it would say and or accessory apartments will be allowed. That is included then in the total number, so that if they have an accessory apartment, that reduces that number of allowed dwelling units. And that then in the third sentence, to make it work, you have to say accessory structures count. Otherwise, you are not counting them. You're counting twice, and it doesn't. You're not counting them at all. So, and then we were asking number 12 be removed completely.
Mr. Ferris on this. Yes, Mr. Blick.
I have a question for Scott. I don't know if you can answer this or not, but since this is considered one just lots, so anytime they add additional homes onto it, it's all going to be on one tax roll for one individual instead of having individual lots on like a subdivision around an HOA or something like that. So is there any difference in tax benefits versus somebody doing it this way versus the other direction?
You're right. I'm not prepared to answer that question. But
ask me and I can answer that for you if you would. Sure, certainly. The way that these are assessed now is that the ground is assessed to the corporation, but each dwelling unit is assessed to the owner, and that will continue to be the same. It will have no impact on this gentleman's tax. In fact, it may reduce it if you build a house. then that brings down the general, because it adds assessed valuation to the property, but there's nothing we're doing here that will impact his taxes. So what will happen is if they build a house, that ground will still continue to be taxed to the corporation as the owner of the ground, but the house itself, as it is today, if you look, there are different tax bills for each one of those yellow units that you see there, but they're only for the structure. Certainly.
Any other questions of the agent? Yes, Mr.
Yes.
Cox, did you have a question? Mr. Cox?
No, sir, I don't have a question, but I think staff may have some comments. Kelly, you want to jump in? You want me to? You're welcome to jump in. Otherwise, I'll just go ahead and, okay. So on the structure issue, the number of structures originally was 20 residential dwelling units, and there was a request for 20 accessory apartments. Well, under our code, you're not really going to be able to do that. So that's where the 40 came from. It's 40 dwelling units. Accessory structures do not count because they're accessory structures unless the idea is that a detached garage would count as a structure.
I'm sorry, and I said structure, I meant apartment.
Okay, so there are really no accessory apartments. There's just 40 dwelling units, which may or may not be.
That's fine.
Some as accessory apartments. The other issue is on the sewage systems, and I think I will let Kelly talk on that one.
And Kelly, given the language, I apologize. I butchered it. So I think you and I are in agreement on what the language should be. I just may not have got it out properly.
Correct. Yeah, I just wanted to straighten that out, that any new residence will have to have its own system. And if any of the existing systems need to be replaced and they serve more than one residence, those would have to be split. In other words, each residents would have to have their own system upon replacement. So we're going to let them stay until such time as they have to be replaced, then they'll have to be separated.
Doesn't the code say if you have an accessory dwelling unit that they must share utilities?
That is correct. They do. That's why we don't have accessory apartments allowed on this site. Well, that was one of the reasons. The other is that each residence does not own the land, therefore they can't have an accessory. Oh, and JR wants a definition of a replacement. So once a septic system fails, no longer accepts sewage, then it has to be replaced. So we're going to go in and put in all new laterals, potentially new tanks. And in this particular case, we would be putting in 2 sets. Also, there was a question earlier, if I may, about where those will be located. We already have a new system that's been put in there that is south of the houses across the drive, which we don't have a problem with them going over the main pipe. We just can't have them driving over the laterals. So we will find room out there somewhere to put these systems.
Yes, Philip.
Just a point of a clarification, I do not believe this was the intent of the applicant when they wrote the PUD, and it was just kind of caught during the discussion here. The way in which the uses are permitted, it says all uses permitted in the rural residential zoning district. The way the zoning code is written for rural residential, if a property has over 20 acres, an event center would be permitted. And the way this is written, that would be allowed. I don't believe it was their intent. So if knowing there, it was brought up in the discussion in today's meeting of concerns of possibly allowing something like that in the future. Again, I don't believe that was the family's intent. They're really only wanting the residential dwelling units and possibly for more in the future. It may be under the consideration of the board today to modify item H under parcel 1, which is on page 6 of your report, to possibly restrict that use from the property. As I don't believe that was their intention, and it was just kind of an oversight.
No, and I wasn't aware of that either. I thought rural residential required it. I apologize. If you would like, and we're very comfortable with you adding that at the end of number 11 permitted uses. Tell me if that's not right place to put it, Philip, but we would add that no event centers are allowed, except with a conditional use permit, which is what would be allowed in rural residential. And that would mean you would get notice, you have to go through this process again and all that. So they're not certainly going to want to do that, but no, their intent was not to have event centers out there.
That's what the current code states, correct?
The current code allows an event center in rural residential if they have 20 acres or more. And that would be allowed by right. This is larger than 20 acres and it is still one lot, even within the PUD. So that would technically allow an event center on this because of the way it's written. All allowed uses in rural residential zoning, based on its acreage, it would technically allow it. So Mr. Ferris is correct that you could add a condition or add language to that said that event centers are not allowed unless you amend the PUD.
Thank you for the clarification. Is there any more discussion or is somebody ready to make a motion? I think we better be careful of all the changes to the original request when we make this motion. Yes, Mr. Aldridge.
I'll try to clean it up best I can. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the PUD rural residential with the exceptions as presented by the applicant and the discussions that we've had here.
So we're just going to add this for the record for clarification. So essentially what you're saying is on number 5, we're looking on page.
Yeah, which
5
with
here,
the
number
wording that's
5,
been
right.
discussed.
We would have 40 residences that were allowed. Accessory structures do not count towards the number of residences. So a detached garage does not count towards the number 40.
Right, that'd be 40 dwelling.
Right. That number 7 would be per the language that Kelly Dixon stated that new construction for dwellings requires separate septic systems. Any replacement of a shared septic system now would have to be split among the dwellings that share it. Eliminating item number 12. And then adding the language that no event centers are allowed unless the PUD is amended.
Correct, for item H.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion for Mr. Aldridge, a second for Mr. Joe Johnson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Mr. Chairman, if I might just say one thing, thank you very much. I want to thank you all for all your service. Some of you may know I'm going into a new venture in my life. I feel there's a conflict coming before you. It's the last time you'll have to look at me probably unless some weird thing happens. I know, you're all happy. But I want to thank you for your service because what you do, most people don't realize the work that goes in. I do because I have to watch it on occasion. And so thank you for your service and your work. And thank you for putting up with me over the last number of years.
Greg, are you going into the ministry?
Not that quiet.
You're a good speaker.
Okay, moving on. We are ready for number 4.4. We have a staff presentation, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Christina Reith with planning staff. This is case number zone 2023-00069. I know that we heard this case on December 28th of last year, so I'll try to not repeat as much as I did last time. So they're requesting a zone change from rural residential to single family SF20. It's 71 acres in size on the southeast corner of West 37th Street North and North 247th Street West. It's currently in use as agricultural land. The property will be subdivided into 41 lots according to the plat that was submitted to the planning department. So the residential lots will average a little bit over 1 acre in size, with the exception of the lots fronting North 247th Street West, which are 3 to 4 acres in size. There are no zoning cases associated with this property. The development will use wells for water access and alternative septic systems. Now, I did send you guys a message that I received from the agent for the applicant regarding the water studies, and then you should have received another additional comment from a member of the public that was printed off and put on the tables there. So hopefully they'll be able to explain that further in depth during that part of the presentation. The requested zone change is in conformance with the community investments plan. And based upon the information available prior to the public hearings, planning staff recommends that the request be approved. This recommendation is based on the golden rules. And since December 28th, I have only received some photos from an individual as well as this packet that I put in front of you guys. So I believe he will be speaking during the presentation today. So let's go through the site photos again. This is an aerial map of the subject site. Next slide, please. This is the Wichita Future Growth Concept Map. Next slide, please. This is looking east away from the site. Next slide, please. This is looking east towards the site. Next slide, please. This is looking north away from the site. Next slide, please. This is looking south towards the site. Next slide, please. This is looking west away from the site. And next slide, please. This is also looking west away from the site. I believe that concludes my site photos. Yes. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Any questions of staff from the commission? If thank you, we will call on the agent or applicant. You'll have 10 minutes. Please give us your name and address.
I'm Doug Eck, and I live at 25060 Indian Ridge Court, which is, as the crow flies, about a half a mile north and west of this proposed development. So obviously I can speak as a concerned neighbor also. Obviously, water came up as an issue at the meeting in December. And obviously, if I had any concern.
Hey, Bob.
Myself, Tom, and Ed are all three partners in this. Yeah. Okay, sorry. All right. Yeah, we didn't have guts enough to take it on by ourselves. Yeah, so anyway, we're tightwads out in Annandale, that's for sure. Okay, so anyway, obviously, if I thought there was an issue with sucking all the groundwater out and running people out of water, it's going to affect me too. It's going to affect Tom. Ed lives about a mile away. Ed lives about a half a mile west. One of our folks that's going to speak today lives in that development too. That'll speak on this too. So there was an issue that came up. I say an issue. Someone said that the rural water district had a water line a half a mile east of here. That's absolutely not true. The boundary of rural water district number 4 comes to within a half a mile east of us, but they do not have a water line there. The closest water line they have is a 4-inch line at 29th and 199th Street. Their concern there, I talked to rural water district, and number 1, that's just west of St. Mark's, a half a mile. Their water pressure they're carrying about 40 to 50 pounds. If we would run another 4 miles or better of water line, some of you, I'm sure you're familiar with pressure loss. I mean, if you got 40 or 50 pounds here and then you run 4 miles of line, you're probably I don't know, I'd have to have an engineer look, but he said it wouldn't work. We're probably gonna have 20 pounds of pressure 4 miles away. Number 2, he was going to pay for, it's probably a $500,000 project just to run that much 4-inch line. So you would also have the cost of some kind of a pumping station to increase pressure there to get it to the site and to make it the amount of pressure and the volume that we would need. But rural water district at this time obviously wouldn't. They have no interest in investing that kind of money. They would need, and he said they would have to study it to even see how many houses it would run by, but they would need nearly 100% participation, signing up, purchasing a water meter and purchasing water. If they ran it by every old farmhouse on the way there, plus our 40 lots It is 40 lots instead of 40. Not a huge deal there, but my guess is that not very many people would sign up for rural water because you've got a well that's providing everything they need. If they ran it by my house, I wouldn't sign up. So the rural water thing is not an option. Mr. Weger had spoke at the last meeting, said his well was surging, running out of water at times. Also stated I don't know if he said his well was 36 feet deep or if his pump was set at 36 feet below the ground level. I don't question that at all, because here's the evidence that we have. About 200 yards west of him, we drilled an 80-foot deep test well. The static water level of that well is 24 feet. Mr. Weger's well, give or take a foot, is 7 feet higher than ours, which would put his static water level at 31 feet. If his pump is at 36 feet, when these well pumps kick on, there's a cone effect. It does start drawing that down. When the pump kicks off, then that all refills back in, and you get back to static water. He's sucking water off of the top 5 feet of the water table. I have no doubt that his well is sucking air at times. Here's what bothers me. I met with Mr. Weger here back in October and told him, you need a deeper well. He said at the last meeting that someone from Winnegar Drilling came out. The gentleman from Winnegar Drilling told him, you need a deeper well. So he left out some things here that were very pertinent to this conversation. The test well, we dug it back in December. And then I got Tim Wagner had told me that they were talking about water quality. So when they drilled the well, they let it run for an hour and a half or 2 hours. I can't remember what Travis said, just to kind of clean it out a little bit. It takes a lot longer than that for a well to clean itself out. So when Mr. Wagner started talking about water quality, I said, well, let's go get a sample. So Winnegar went out there, fired up a pump, hooked up to a generator, let it run for another hour. We took a sample. When we were taking the sample, I picked up the hose and I took 5 or 6 big gulps of it. My first thought in my head was, this tastes like my water out of my garden hose. It's the same water. There's no smell. There's no taste. Took it to Cantech. We've got a little device that tests for total dissolved solids, which is everything from calcium to manganese and zinc and all these different whatever you want, minerals or whatever they're called. And the water still, it was in a clear glass test jar. You could see through it, but it was still a little clouded. The well's not clean yet, but it's still, you pour it into this little machine, dump it out, pour it in, dump it out, and then you test it. And within a few seconds, it comes up with your total dissolved solids. And it was 1,600 and something or other. He put some drops in a little test tube thing. And he said the sulfates are around 250. So what I got to thinking after I took that sample, I said, you know what, I'm going to go get a sample for my own well. Because this is all, when they're drilling out here and you look at all the well logs, I think, did you send the well logs to her? Okay. You hit what's called gray shale. It's a fractured gray shale. That's where there's space between it for water to be stored. You hit, if you look at these well logs, there's 30 to 40 to 50 feet of this gray shale where this water is held. And it's all pretty much at the same level out there. So I take my water sample to the same guy. He came up with, I have actually 1,900 and some odd total dissolved solids. My sulfates tested out at 250 also. So in theory, that water's better than what I got in my house. I've been in my house for how long has it been? 3.5 years, 3 years, can't remember. I don't get sick. I've got a softener at my house. I don't have a fancy softener like what Cantech sells. I've got one from Lowe's. It was $650 and I have no issues with my water. I have a reverse osmosis system, which takes, keep in mind, my water sample was taken out of my sill faucet, which is straight out of the well. There's no treatment has been done to it. So my drinking water, I've got a little spigot at the kitchen sink. It goes to my ice maker for my fridge. It runs through a reverse osmosis system. That reverse osmosis water, what comes out of there is what you see in a bottle of Aquafina. That's how they make bottled water. They run it through a reverse osmosis system. Takes care of the nitrates if there is some. I took Tom's sample in too, by the way. His was 1,400 total dissolved solids. And he had a nitrate figure of 2. Anything 10 or under there's EPA says there's not an issue with it. Mine is at 0 for nitrates. So anyway, reverse osmosis takes the sulfates out of the water. I went to the EPA's page and they had a statement in there that the current figure of 250 milligrams per liter should protect almost all consumers from the aesthetic effects of sulfate, meaning a smell or a taste. And the health-based advisory value of 500 milligrams per liter will protect against sulfate's laxative effects. They say that's one of the things that sulfates can do is it can serve as a laxative, but that's
Sir,
at 500.
Time's up. Can you wrap this up, please? I can
Is
give
that
you
10
another
minutes
minute.
already? Okay. That was 10 already? Okay. So anyway, I think Winnegar Drilling will give us a good idea of water quantity. I do need to touch on was there a concern about the herbicide question? Because the herbicide question, and I'll make this really short. If you use
We'll have an opportunity to
Okay.
ask you questions when this is over. So if we
Okay.
can just wrap it up, and then if we have any questions,
Okay.
I'll ask them.
That's really most of what I've got. Our stance is we don't have a water quantity or a water quality issue. What we can still do, we pump that well to get that sample. We were pumping it at 45 feet, which would be 52 feet at Mr. Weger's house, water table wise. So it pumped 20 gallons a minute. Just it never left 20 gallons a minute. So
Well, thank you for your detailed presentation, sir. And if you'll stand by for questions, Mr. Aldridge.
Yes, sir. I've got a question for you. Generally, the amount of the groundwater used for the domestic purpose is a minimal impact on the groundwater level and its sustainability of the aquifer. However, a review of the nearby well logs indicates that the subsurface consists of mainly topsoil, clay, bedrock, or little to no aquifer sand and gravel zones. The bedrock appears to encounter approximately 35 or 40 foot below. But just to sum this up, that this is coming from the Equisbed Groundwater Management District number 2. And it says the nearby well logs further indicate that domestic wells in this area are typically drilled and completed in bedrock totaling 75 to 100 foot below surface, which may not yield adequate quantity or quality of the water. Therefore, the district recommends further evaluation, including test drilling, extended well test pumping to determine the aquifer's yield capabilities and the water quality in that location. Sort of contradicts what you just got done saying.
Okay, so I've actually got these from Winnegar Drilling. The new well that we drilled 200 yards west of Mr. Weger there, 0 to 2 feet topsoil, 2 to 26 feet clay brown, 26 to 28 sand, 28 to 31 shale broken, gray broken shale, 31 to 42 shale moderately weathered gray, 42 to 80 shale moderately weathered gray. There was a dog kennel that went in just north of there. I guess it'd be a quarter mile on the west side of Andale Road. 82 foot well, topsoil, clay brown, sand fine, shale moderately weathered, shale moderately weathered, shale moderately weathered. There's shale. Here was one that was built 2460 West, 2463 West 37th.
Excuse me, sir.
yeah.
My point that I was trying to get at is that based on the groundwater management district 2, they're not giving me that warm fuzzy feeling that there's adequate water supply or quality here.
But did they send you any of these that are actual results of what this is a well log that the well driller files every time he drills a well? He will file those, and we have there were some wells drilled up on 29th Street, a little south of there, 3/4 of a mile, that show the same general what do you want to call it, geological layers. Hedge Creek, a couple of the lots right across the street, a bunch of them weren't on the website. There was one back about the half a mile line. I can't remember whose name that was under. Can't remember. It was like a 2011, but and then obviously everything we've done over in Indian Ridge. I guess part of my point earlier when I was talking about my own water is that's how my well is too. It ran into gray shale and it's the same big, I like to refer to it as a sponge, and maybe Travis can speak to that a little better, but
well, this is the High Plains Aquifer and the Equus-Bed Aquifer that's located in this area. But based on some of the reports that I'm seeing that we've received from staff, and trust me, I am by no means an expert on this at all. But it just doesn't appear, based on reports that we've got from the Equus-Bed Groundwater Management District number 2, that there would be adequate. At this point, they don't feel there's going to be adequate water quality, and they do suggest that it looks like 75 to 100 foot below the surface, and that still may not yield the adequate amount. I sort of sound like there needs to be additional testing here to make sure.
We're not opposed to that. We're not opposed to that. You know, you know, the day I met Mr. Wegger and we left, they don't want houses around. I mean, I'm not disputing that they don't have a right to try to fight it. Absolutely. I'd like to live in the middle of a quarter section of ground with no neighbors, but I don't have that kind of money. You know,
Sir,
we're trying to offer.
You'll have the chance for rebuttal after we hear from other comments. Yeah. Is there anybody else on the commission that has any questions of the applicant? If not, is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on this case?
Can I add one thing about the groundwater management district? Okay.
Now, sir, you'll have a chance for rebuttal at the end of hearing any public comments on this. Please state your name and address.
Can I ask a quick question? I sent you those pictures. Were you going to put those on a PowerPoint or anything? So that would be on my time, or is it a little bit more difficult?
I did send photos to Paul, so they should be on the PowerPoint.
Paul, if we could pull up the additional pictures that were sent.
You're gonna have to just work with me for just a sec because I don't know how they had them in order. Okay, we can. I don't know
if you your name and address, please, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Jared Schneider. I live at 3400 North 247th. Me and my employer own the 80 acres directly south of the said development. Groundwater remains to be a major concern of both our quality as stated in GMD2's preliminary safe yield evaluation. That was emailed to this board. Contacting Pam Schaefer with KDHE with water samples taken from my well. She has grave concerns with the geology, high mineral content of the water in the area. Groundwater in our immediate area is recharged by natural rainfall and or some percolation in the clay bed that allows a creek or stream to recharge the groundwater as told by her. The Cowskin Creek runs right across the road of said development, but next to an abandoned feedlot where manure and other animal waste had been flowing into the creek for years, thus contributing to the mineral content, bacteria in the groundwater. E. coli and other bacteria were found in my well test, which is a direct link to this problem. I just hope that they are ready to disclose that information to any future home buyers. No soil testing has been done for the use of the septic systems. There are 5 different soil types on that property, making it difficult for a one-size-fits-all septic system to handle this. Drainage off of our field is still a major concern. Because the existing ponds on the development property are in line with the Blue Line stream. I don't know how they plan to do any of that. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers are in charge of Blue Line streams and watershed projects. They have not been contacted. The Renwick School District was never informed of this development. I spoke to Superintendent Tim Hayden. He has concerns of the rapid growth in this rural area, putting strain on transportation, faculty, and facility of the schools. This development lands in St. Mark's School District. There are cars drop-off time and pickup time at school blocking 29th Street, which is illegal to have the traffic blocking the road. The county's been informed of this, notified several times in years past, never has done anything to it. The school there is out of real estate to add any more classrooms, parking lots to solve these problems. Farming against these new homes remains one of my biggest concerns, as shown on this picture. Without the buffer zone provided by the developer, I stand to lose a significant existing income for me and my family. This picture right here, both of those, the one on your left-hand side is a wheat field planted in October. The other one is a fallow ground that they sprayed. If you rotate to the next picture, you will see they killed 300 feet of that wheat field right there. It starts greening back up. It's almost 300 feet that is dead. That was applied by a commercial applicator in the area. No one knows what happened, but mistakes happen. So I'm just saying that's 2 farmers fighting against each other, or having to go, to an insurance agent and find something else out. But now if I have that many homes up against that, that's a lot of people against me. So, and unfarmable ground, I would ask for my extension of 2 minutes if you would deem so fit.
I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yes, sir. Without this buffer zone, I will be forced to seek other sources of income for the farmable ground. Others might have to we might have to store stuff out there. We've been talking about animal lots or alternative sources of such solar fields or something to recover that lost income. This is an active farm. We farm every day with it. So you better be ready to, so everybody that lives there better be ready to deal with us producing noise, light, dust, and odor in that association that is associated with the working farm. And that is quoted in the community investment plan. So if you're going to live next to this development, or if we are not going to develop according to these guidelines, I would ask, why do we have them in place? When you change zoning from a rural residency like this to an SF20, I feel it's a very slippery slope. Once we go to SF20, where do we stop? Do we go to SF10? Do we start doing things outside the rural residential area? We are not in that community investment plan's future growth. So we don't have the infrastructure there. We don't have the sewer lines. We don't have any, water coming in there. We're seeing water problems there already. That geology shale, we are way outside the High Plains aquifer, as you see there. That aquifer is also another 50 feet down. If you go into Ando, you're going down a hill into the aquifer. So we're way up on top. We are getting our water from rainfall and everything else. So I'm just afraid that another 40 wells, and in Indian Range Phase 1, on any other pictures of the well logs, there are, I believe I counted today, there are 11 open lots. So there's 27 houses built there so far, but there's 32 wells. Hedge Creek has multiple wells per household, and they're using them for irrigation and for domestic use, which just scares me. How many wells are we going to have to drill out there? Because it might be more than 40.
Thank you for your testimony.
Yes.
Sir, I have a quick question.
Yes.
Do you have to monitor how much water that you're pulling out of the ground on your wells for?
Yes, we are regulated for any type of irrigation, anything that we're doing. So I applied for a domestic use well, and they asked me even how many livestock I'm going to be using for that. Doesn't matter how many, I'm over 5 or I'm on that 80 acres. If I want to go out there and be able to water my livestock, if I bring some in, they want to know how much.
And they, is that meaning the state of Kansas?
Say again?
Is that the state of Kansas
Yes.
regulating it?
Yep, that is GMD2s and the state of Kansas Agricultural Board. They work in conjunction with each other to regulate these wells.
And why are they regulating it?
Why are they regulating? For water usage.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question, Mr. Blick?
I'm not an expert on water and I'm learning a lot today, but how many gallons do you actually, since you know they're regulated, how many gallons do you guys pull out on a daily basis?
In our domestic wells, we do not have those metered because they are not, or that is on a domestic well there. Any type of irrigation or anything like that is all metered and has to be turned into GMD2 and everything. They're pulling multiple acre inches out. So they might run 900 gallons per minute, but I asked Tim Bosey at GMD2 and he looked at it and he goes, I can not even tell you how many, or I go over, I get to, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Where was I?
How many gallons?
How many gallons per minute? They're pulling 900 gallon per minute out of those pumps, but those are in the High Plains aquifer. So those are regulated. They have a lot more sand, gravel, perforation for water to move accessibly to there, not shale, not clay. That is.
So you're just running residential. You're not running.
No, we're not allowed. Our preliminary test, the safe yield evaluation will not let, GMD2 will not let us put a well in here for any irrigation or for anything else.
Okay.
So they denied us.
Joshua, just for your reference on this letter we have from the Groundwater Management District, it says that domestic use, including the irrigation of 2 acres or less of lawn, and most of these lots are just about a little over 1 acre, is exempt from water permitting requirements under the Kansas Water Appropriation Act. So basically all of these wells we're talking about would be exempt from permitting requirements.
So they are exempt, but we're not. Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public that would like to speak on this? Please give us your name and address. You'll have 3 minutes and please contain your comments to new information on this. Thank you.
My name is Doug Wager. I live at 24327 West 37th Street North. I'm the property in the middle of this development. We did touch base about the well, and I have no doubt that there is water available. Everybody has wells without needing to pull a permit. There's no limit on how many wells everybody wants to drill. I had the Groundwater Management District do an assessment on my address, my property, as far as adding another well, and I got the same report that it wasn't recommended, that it's possible, but that they wouldn't recommend it. And then I was 1.5 miles from the aquifer boundary that's north of us that contains Andale. All of us in the housing district, the Indian Ridge one that just got built, we're all outside the aquifer. So water exists. I'm not questioning it. It's how much can it support that. If you were going to put a 40 house development inside the city of Wichita, you're going to put water to it. If 40 is sustainable and something happens to my property where I lose water, who takes care of that? I didn't have a choice over everybody else drawing from the same place. So, I'm requesting that you don't rezone from rural residential to single family. The second thing I wanted to talk about was the sewer drainage. With the groundwater district too, it talks about the soil types, and with the amount of clay, I question whether this engineered system is going to work, that it's a pressurized pump system below the ground. If it doesn't have a chance to absorb and filter, is it going to work? I haven't seen a soils test yet that says this is even going to be allowed. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was the community investment plan, talking about moving higher intensity into lower density developments. Everything around this is a 5 acre or a farm ground. 1 acre lots all over the place, 40 houses and 70 acres. That was, that's quite a bit. Any questions?
Thank you, sir. Do we have anybody else from the public that would like to speak on this case? Sir, go to the microphone, please, and give us your name and address, and you will have 3 minutes.
I'm Max Castleman, and I live at 11527 West Parley here in Wichita. I did sell the land to the gentleman that just spoke here, or the farm place, after my wife passed away from cancer years ago. I know there's some pretty rough feelings about this. And the thing that has got me between a rock and a hard spot is the people that's buying it were students of mine at Andale High School. The people living across the street were students of mine at Andale High School. And I'm sitting in the middle here, taking the punches. I don't know really what to tell you guys about it, other than everybody does have a right for their opinion. I'm old and I bought the farm years ago from Bernie Engelbrick. And I bought it for an investment property to think, well, when I get older, I'd probably move it out and get rid of it because I no longer can take care of it. I did build the 2 ponds there on the west end and had wonderful fish for the longest time. Then it decided to quit raining and the fish couldn't breathe air. So they're gone. And it was time to move on. And I know Doug and Tom, they put a lot of time into this, and Brandy. And I have a few little things here that I feel that should be done out there that probably can't be done. One was a rural water district, which I found out today is impossible and probably not a financially great deal to move. The second thing that I thought could possibly happen is make larger lot sizes and sell them for more money. But talking to Doug, he said that's pretty much out of the question also. But the one thing we're talking about drinking water quite a bit, but there is another problem out there. When it does rain, where does the water that's running off go to? According to what I can gather out of the map, it's got 3 places.
Sir, you'll have to show that on the with the mouse.
It runs around here.
Sir, we're taping all this, so you have to show it with the mouse on the computer.
Can I use a mouse here?
Oh,
yes.
What do I need? Oh, I can't run a mouse. I'm not a computer person. But anyway, let's see that dark strip right down through here. Bam, bam. This runs right through Vaughn's yard. That's a drain out. That's one place for water to go out.
Can you go closer to the mic, please?
That is one place.
Sir, your time is up.
Come to Kansas again. It might rain in Kansas again, big. I have seen that where that is one big river. But there is a road that goes through up there now if they go ahead and do this development. And the terrace takes the water from the south end of that and in Kenny Winnegar's fields from Kenny's farm. And it shoots it around there and there's put in
3 minutes is up.
A structure there, but that shoots the water into Neville's farm to the east. Now that, I think they probably need, the Civil Corps of Engineers put all this stuff in. We just did it about 4 or 5 years ago. Redid the terraces. When we build houses, the terraces will be gone. And I don't know where the water's gonna go. That is down the road.
Philip?
Okay, and looking on down through here.
Sir, your
Sir,
time.
your
Might as well
time
be
is up.
buried.
Your
is-
time is up.
Sprinkler system.
Your time
So your
is
time
up.
is up.
Your time is up.
We gave you a copy of the rules of this process when you came in here. And this is the time we allow people that are from the public to speak. So thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Okay, please give us your name and address. You'll have 3 minutes, and please give us only new information.
My name is Jane Neville, and I live at 24401 West 21st Goddard. And we are the Nevilles that have the property here at that spot there. And I guess I'm just gonna go off of some experience. I would ask that this water has a funny way of coming up, whether it's above ground or below ground. We, on our property here, then we also have property to the south and to the east. And we were having water issues, too much water runoff coming. So we took it to the county and they told us that, oh no, we've done tests and you're not taking any more water runoff than you had in the past. But we showed evidence that we were taking on more water than what we had in the past. The Sedgwick County engineer, when we told them what was taking place, they paused, they looked at us and they said, ma'am, if we put the water flow back where it was, I'm gonna be getting calls from all these homeowners who don't want water in their yard. You're one call. So we're leaving it the way we've left it, the way it's changed. And so then they suggested, so that ended the negotiation. They were not interested in hearing our concerns. And then they suggested that we put a cement waterway on our property so that the water would get moved away from doing damage to our property. And I'm going, but let's just back up, put the water back where it was coming from and don't dump water on us. So so what we were told is that going forward, keep an eye when there's development, because when the homes when there's cement and roads, they do not take in the water like farm ground does. So all I'm saying is keep your water where it's at. We don't need more water coming off on our property. We've already got a problem with it. And so you're just talking as the crow flies, a catty corner across the section. We've already got too much water and it's eating us out. And that was the county's suggestion. Oh, let's just put a cement water structure on your place. That wasn't our fault. We didn't do that. So keep the water where it belongs. That's all I've got.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? You've got 3 minutes. Please give us your name and address and confine your comments to only new information, please.
Okay, I'm Mark Vaughn. I live at 24220 West 37th, be this house right there. I just wanted to follow up on something that was said earlier about water usage. If you go to Indian Ridge or Hedge Creek, you see that everybody's got their nice, large manicured lawns with their sprinkler systems going on 1 or 2 acres. To water a acre of fescue, they recommend 1 to 2 gallons a week. If you water 1 gallon a week, that's 27,000 gallons of water per acre. And we're going to multiply, let's say times 30 to take into account the houses and roads. I am very concerned that with the tight clay we have in that area, those wells could not support that kind of usage. They will not grant agriculture permits for water wells, but we're essentially going to be doing the same thing here. Any questions?
Thank you, sir. Are there any other speakers from the public who would like to talk on this? Give us your name and address and you'll have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Travis and I live at 25400 West Indian Ridge Court. Can't see it on the picture here, but about the same way, about half a mile as a crow flies, neighboring this property. I've also been in the water well business and industry for coming up to 20 years this year. Recently was informed that there was concern of groundwater usage and potential stress hazards to this area. I will say I am one for water conservation when it comes to how wasteful we are as humans to groundwater. I will also say it's only because of a lack of knowledge that we have letting people know. So, will we run out of water next year, even the next 20 years? The answer to that's no. Geological studies done by the state of Kansas and the University of Kansas have found that in the last 10 years, we've shown very little change in groundwater levels, being at 2 inches difference since 2013. The hydrologist giving this presentation provided us with charts showing their findings and gave predictions that there would be little to no difference for the next 3 decades on water levels. Now, yes, we are going through a drought and static water levels are lower than they are, but that's, just due to how the water in this area travels. It's not like we were mentioning before, sand formation like the Equus beds or high plains, aquifer. We are in weathered shell out there. Now, weathered shell is different. It's broken up. It's fractured shell. So what that means is we got cracks in the formation that the water from the Equus beds is feeding into. On great years where we're not, pumping waters, we're not in drought, atmospheric pressure pushes, it's better, it's harder, it brings that water level up in everybody's water wells. When we're in drought conditions, that drops. And then what also happens is when your pumps are set, you have what we call pumping drawdown levels. So, initially I've heard this, static water levels at 24 feet right now. On a real wet seasons and everything of that nature, we could be at 18, 17 feet. Mr. Wager, I know Doug very well too. And in his unfortunate situation is he bought, a property that had a shallow well. Chances are when he bought it and everything, we had great years of water. And then now we're seeing that drought. But what we're showing is it's going to come back up. I'm not saying that's perfect conditions for him either at all. So, but that's a big problem. Kansas Geological Survey has a public website that people can visit to research these findings. Shows all the charts I was going to talk about. You can go to that website. It is kgs.ku.edu. Can I continue or?
Please
I was going to give you that for the record, maybe.
We have given you folks the rules of this meeting when you come in here.
Absolutely.
Everybody has 3 minutes to speak. You want to repeat that website?
You bet. It is kgs.ku.edu. And what that will show is all state of Kansas and Kansas University of Kansas is monitoring wells within the state that feed off the Equus beds and that. And it'll show you those charts. I was talking about the 2 closest wells that they have in this area show about 2 inches of difference. And it'll actually fall back all the way to 1938.
Okay, thank you, sir.
You bet.
Appreciate it. Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Any questions? No. Thank you.
Have another speaker? Please give us your name and address. You will have 3 minutes. And please confine your comments to new information.
Raymond Roser, 24310 West 37th. I spoke last time and I was asked a question about static water pressure or static water level. The geological site says my well was at 24 feet when the house was built. I measured it yesterday, it's at 32 feet. So that water fluctuates quite a bit. The other problem I do have now that I thought of is the dust. We have a predominantly south wind most of the year. I'm south of that development. The dust off 247th or the dust off 37th is already an issue. You really don't want to open your windows in the summertime. With these two roads and cul-de-sacs they're putting in, they're going to be dirt, mud, and sand. Basically, they're not going to. They'll hold up like the roads over at Indian Ridge 1, which are a sloppy mess at the moment. That is the other thing. I just want to reiterate. I'm against the zoning change because we're rural residential, low density. SF2 is well outside the economic growth map that I saw. And that's all I have.
Thank you, sir. If there's no one else that has new information to present at this time, I'd like to bring it back well, actually, we're going to give the applicant 2 minutes rebuttal on this. I know that sounds like a short period of time, but again,
okay. All right. He talked about
here.
Okay. He talked about bacteria. If you get bacteria in your well, you chlorinate it. Half a gallon of bleach, run it through your system, let it sit 12 hours. Any water lab will tell you that. Engineer is going to take care of the drainage. Engineer is not going to dump more water on people than what they're getting now. There's going to be several retention ponds. The 2 ponds that are there now are going to be dug out bigger. I'm not going to be pretending to be the one that's going to design the drainage. That's an engineer's job. So we'll trust him. The farmer or the applicator is responsible for the herbicide, and the buffer zone that Mr. Schneider spoke of is downwind. If there's a south wind and he's spraying that day and he is using one herbicide that is used for what's called a dicamba soybean, it's a 240-foot buffer. So you need to wait till the wind comes out of the north or there's no wind, then he can spray that 240 feet. Nothing keeps him from farming that. There are plenty of other options that are the same price that you can use. He does not use dicamba beans. He used enlist beans. All the enlist bean chemistries are 0 or 30-foot buffers. So hey, listen, I'm from a farming family. We got farm ground. I'm not trying to make anything harder on a farmer. Trust me. But he's not giving you the whole story there. Dust, odors, noise. That's already a part of our restrictive covenants. People are not going to come in there and complain about the farming. They know what they're doing. They're going to sign something that says, hey, I received a copy of these restrictive covenants. They're not going to whine about that. He said there's more than one well on some of the lots in Indian Ridge. I'm one of them. I pump out of one into my geothermal and I pump into the second one. So it's not using any water. It's taken back in. Let's see, the exemption for residential wells on permitting, that's correct, of course. The formations listed on the well logs tell the story. The nearest monitoring well that Travis started to talk about is 53rd and 215th. Okay.
Your time's up on this. You're going to have to wrap this up.
Okay. Alternative septics are used in rock in other states. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you got clay. Alternative septic can be designed to any soil type. So Tim Wagner will tell you that.
Thank you for your testimony. I'm going to bring it back to the commission now for discussion and action. Ms. Foster.
I am normally in favor of more dense development, but I think given if this plat was brought before us in an area where it could attach to city water and city sewer, I would be fine with it. I think it is wildly inappropriate for this location to cram that many wells and that many septic systems in that small an area. My inclination is to not approve this proposed zoning change, but I'd like to hear what other commissioners have to say.
Further comments?
So is that a motion?
No, I was asking what other people wanted to say, but if people want a motion, I will move to deny the application.
I'd like to hold off just a minute because of the extended conversation on this to give anybody else a chance to talk on this before. Excuse me, counsel, go ahead.
Thank you. Kirk Sponsel, Deputy County Counselor. I just wanted to come in and say, certainly there is case law, Dings versus Phillips, which does indicate the availability of water both to subject property and other area properties is proper consideration of zoning body hearing request for zoning change. So it is appropriate to analyze this question. My comment would be that if the recommendation is for denial, that is counter to the recommendation of the planning staff. So I would recommend that factors and consideration related to golden factors, including but going beyond that water, be included in a motion. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion or comments on this? Oh, yes, Mr. Warren.
I guess the question I got for the commissioners, does anybody on the commission feel like there's adequate water? So the report that we got from the Equisped, this management, this document like this we got recommends more further evaluation. So that tells me that we don't have enough information to go forward. So I would make a motion to deny due to water considerations.
So would that be a second, the result of your motion? Yep.
Okay.
I was second.
I just
want
want
a chance to make a motion if you want to, and then you can make a substitute motion. Actually, I did want to have further discussion though, with all due respect, Ms. Foster. Want to make a substitute motion to this, you can do it.
I don't think that's what I think she made the motion to deny based on the conversations we're having. And I believe Mr. Warren seconded that motion.
Is that correct?
That works for me.
Okay, it's a motion and a second. Mr. Blick.
I have a question for staff. So if this gets denied, if it goes and passes, can they come back later, a date, how far and how long before they can come back, or is it done?
If ultimately the Board of County Commissioner is the final say on the zoning matter, if the Board of County Commission were to deny the zone change, the zoning code requires them to wait a year from the Planning Commission date from the advertised public hearing, which would be the latest one, this one, not the first deferral. They would have to wait a year from today's date in order to submit an application for the same request.
Sounds great. And then also on county staff or lawyer. So could also, if there was a substitute motion to have approval of further studies based off the state, can you put a restriction on that and say based off of motion to approve and making sure there's additional studies, and if they're with their approval, can they follow? I'm trying to think of the right words.
I mean, essentially that's a contingent approval, I think, in basis, and I have never seen that, and I would be hesitant to proceed down that route.
Thank you.
I would make a substitute motion to defer until we add additional studies from the groundwater management district number 2.
I'd second it. Okay, we have a motion and a second to defer this. Yes, Mr. Aldrich.
We just deferred this for that purpose, and now we're hearing it again off that deferment. So
that's correct.
But I think what we asked him to do was to check on the rural water and do some test wells, which that's what they did. The results on that indicate there's adequate water. So we're kind of changing the rule. So I'm willing to let them look for some more information.
But my concerns is that we have basically a counter on that from the Equisped groundwater management, the district number 2. says the opposite. So I'm sort of stuck now.
Okay, for my clarification, the motion is to defer this until more information is available. What information are we looking for and from where?
I think they need to determine between that one report that says it's not and one stuff that they got that says it is, and try to come up with something that's more concrete.
To get a motion in a second before, I'm sorry, sir, the public is done with their portion of speaking on this, or the applicant as well. We have a motion in a second.
Have a substitute motion in a second.
Who's the second?
Kirk
made the substitute motion.
No, I made the substitute motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Joe Johnson made the motion. Bill Johnson made the second. Now we can have a discussion on that motion.
Kirk
Excuse me,
Sponsel, Deputy
Counselor.
County Counselor, real quick here. I know the time for discussion has ended. However, I think it could potentially be advantageous to narrowly open up the question to the applicant if they're even willing to pursue further well testing. Because if they're not willing to, I don't see a reason for further deferral, but that's just up to the will of the board.
I will defer to your admonition on that. Can I have the applicant back up here? Would you be willing to do this if this is our decision?
Okay, here's the way I'm looking at it here. Last meeting we deferred, we did drill a well. We didn't know how many we need to drill. Groundwater management, the closest monitoring well they have is 53rd and 215th and 53rd and 199th. You're getting up into Equus beds there. They don't have any monitoring wells here. All of the well logs we have, and if you tell me how many wells do you think we need to drill to show that there's consistency in this gray shale? Because again, we would be absolute morons to move forward with this if we thought that there was an issue. And we live there. We've drilled a well. We've seen the rest of them. I mean, if you want to have us drill a well in each corner of the, you get to be where you're spending money hand over fist. But
I understand your frustration, but can you tell me whether or not you would be in favor of more explanation on this?
Yes, I would ask for some guidance as to how many wells do you think we should drill? In the Indian Ridge First Edition, we drilled 3 wells there, and it was asked for. Well, I can't remember who asked us for it. We didn't get asked until the last meeting. It was one of the things they asked for, and we did 3.
My thinking on this is that none of us are experts on drilling wells. And if that is what your wish is, I would suggest that we include in that motion that you work with staff to determine the answer to that question.
And really, ultimately, I think the only guy who has spoken that has the expertise on the wells is Mr. Cutler. And his statement has been that he's not concerned with the water.
Mr. Warren. Excuse me, Ms. Miles.
Yeah, can I ask the Deputy County Counselor a question? So I'm just curious about what's the consequences, I guess, if we were to approve this and he was to build the houses, develop this development and find there was not adequate water.
Kirk Sponsel, Deputy County Counselor, I don't know that there's necessarily a legal consideration in that question. Off the top of my head, I'm not necessarily seeing one. I mean, areas go without water sometimes. I don't know, and I don't want to speculate on any potential civil matters that would go beyond the county. But I can't say I see anything immediately in regards to county action.
Okay, we have a substitute motion. Yes, excuse me, Mr. Warren.
I want to give you an idea of what I'm looking for. You talk about the flood water come through and that you needed to hire an engineer. You spoke for a long time and I have no idea what you said.
Okay.
You need to hire an engineer or somebody that understands this and can explain it to me in a way that can convince me that there's adequate water. And you did a poor job. So I mean, you talked about everything you did and it doesn't mean anything to me. So somebody's got to come in here and explain to me why there's water there and why will justify my vote to allow you to go forward.
Okay.
Okay.
But
we have a, sir?
Okay. All right.
I just think let's just kind of bring it down a level here, and we have a substitute motion and a second to defer this for more investigation, and we're going to work with staff on that. I'd like to hear let's have a voice vote on that. I mean, excuse me, a roll call vote on this.
Sure thing. Mr. Dool. Again, this is for the motion to defer.
And I would recommend that the deferral be to a set date, a specific date, whether that's 2 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, whatever it is.
What's the recommendation of staff on that? 2 weeks, 4 weeks?
It sounds like the applicant over here is asking for a month. So the planning commission in a month is the February 22nd hearing.
The people that made the motion, the second agreeable with that?
I'd agree to it. I'm gonna say I'd agree to it.
Mr. Joe Johnson.
I just don't think that's long enough. I hate to come back here and not have enough information.
Say the date.
We could do March 14th.
Looking for my calendar, I couldn't find it. That was it.
Dates after that are March 14th, March 28th.
Let's do March 28th.
I agree.
Okay, we have a motion and a second with a date of March 28th to defer it to Mr. Blick.
Do you think that's going to be enough time? Because even on this document, it says that they need further evaluation, drilling, excessive testing and all that to come up with this group also, besides the applicant.
I'm not an expert on that.
I would say that staff should have the prerogative, if they don't feel like they have enough information, to extend it.
The deferral could be extended. You can set it today if it's coming close to it.
Okay, let's leave it at that. The deferral could be extended by the staff. We have a motion and a second to defer this case to March.
Kirk Sponsel, Deputy County Counselor. The preference is for there to be set dates just to ensure that proper notice is given that those interested in the case would be present and available. I think that's standard practice, and I think that's the preferred practice.
Understand. Thank you. We'll have a voice vote on this.
Okay, for the substitute motion to defer, Mr. Dool? Ms. Foster?
No.
McKay?
No.
Bill Johnson?
Yes.
Blick?
Yes.
Warren?
No.
Joe Johnson?
Yes.
Miles?
Yes.
Zimbelman? Yes. Aldrich?
No.
Williams Bay?
No.
The motion fails 6-5. There was 5 yes votes and 6 no votes. So the motion to defer fails.
Okay, so we go back to the first motion, and if I recall, that motion was to deny the request. We had a second on that. Foster moved the motion, is that correct?
I have Foster and Warren as the motion maker in the second.
Okay, let's have a voice vote on the main motion.
Mr. Dool,
Yes.
Foster,
Yes.
McKay,
Yes.
Bill Johnson,
No.
Blick,
No.
Warren,
Yes.
Joe Johnson,
No.
Miles,
No.
Zimbelman, Aldrich,
Yes.
Williams Bay.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-5.
Thank you. Is there any other business to come before the planning commission today? If not, we are adjourned.